If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61. This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 6150 PS. Just a question, why are you so nervous? Seeing Chuji's anxious expression, Luo Qing was puzzled. He hadn't done anything yet, so why was this kid so worked up? I am master, my mom is sick too. Please, don't harm her. Chuji's voice was trembling, his words carrying a hint of a sob. He thought bitterly that he never should have approached the Fatui. The grown UPS were right, these people were even worse than pirates or soldiers. When did I say I was going to harm your mother? Luo Qing frowned, wondering what kind of strange thoughts were running through the boy's head. All right, I was just asking. If you don't want to talk about it, then forget it. It's fine. You can go now. He waved dismissively, indicating that Chuji was free to leave. When Luo Qing turned back to observe the village, the boy had already vanished from sight. In the game, Hiji village was deserted, overrun by wandering Ronin and bandits, with no sign of the original villagers. Yet now, there were still refugees and villagers inhabiting the settlement, which caught him by surprise. As he was musing, snippets of a conversation reached his ears. Did you hear? Ryoko from the south side of the village passed away. That's not all. Soon from the west she couldn't stand the voices of the lingering spirits in her head and threw herself into the sea. Sigh. When will this nightmare end? What's that Snezhnayan doing here? Isn't he afraid of catching whatever we have? Fatui, hey. They're a bunch of reckless types. Who knows, maybe they were the ones behind the explosion at Tatarasuna. Tisk, seems I arrived just in time. Glancing at the wary villagers who were eyeing him, Luo Qing couldn't help but chuckle to himself. He still remembered the tragic fate of Hiji village from his gaming days. The sight of the villagers still alive here left him unexpectedly nostalgic. Lost in thought, he noticed a squad of heavily armored samurai entering from the opposite end of the village. The leader carried a flyer, which he raised high as he reached the village center, shouting out loud. Citizens of Hiji village. Lord Kyujou Takayuki of the Tenryou Commission sympathizes deeply with the hardships faced by the refugees of Yashiori Island and has come to rescue you. The Tenryou Commission will ensure your safe departure from this island and transport you to Narukami Island. If you are in dire need of aid, head immediately to the front lines of the Kyujou encampment. With that, the samurai leader posted the flyer onto a stone wall and quickly led his men out of the village. A crowd of villagers gathered around the flyer, murmuring among themselves. Didn't the shogunate forbid us from leaving? Why are they suddenly offering to help? Who knows? Maybe it's another one of their schemes. Those soldiers are no better than bandits. If they hadn't messed with the warding stones, none of us would be sick. They're worse than the pirates. I can't stay here any longer. If I do, I'll either starve or get sick. Yeah, at least if we go to the Kyujou camp, there'll be food. After some discussion, many of the refugees started making their way to the Kyujou camp, leaving only a handful of local villagers who were still hesitant, uncertain whether to trust the shogunate's notice. To Luo Qing's amusement, not far from the shogunate's flyer was another notice, this one from the Sangonomiya resistance. It read. The shogunate's tyranny is unjust. The gods have abandoned us. Join the resistance and overthrow the rule of the shogunate. How interesting. Luo Qing knew well what awaited those who believed in the Kyujou camp's promises. After all, the one who issued that order was none other than Kyujou Takayuki, the head of the Kyujou clan and a close ally of the Fatui. And as fate would have it, his mission here involved dealing with that very man, finding leverage to secure his complete cooperation with the Fatui. So it seems I won't be able to stay a mere bystander. Luo Qing wasn't the type to go out of his way to save people he had no connection with. He wasn't cruel, but neither was he excessively kind-hearted. However, now that the fate of Hiji village's villagers might serve as a valuable bargaining chip against Kyujou Takayuki, he saw a potential opportunity. As he pondered his next move, he heard a boy's anxious voice not far away. Turning around, he saw Hiji, who had previously disappeared, back at the village entrance, crying out to a young man. Brother Boba, my mom is gone. Did you see her anywhere? This isn't the right place to talk. Boba glanced around warily before pulling Hiji into a secluded corner. Curious, Luo Qing quietly followed. From the shadow of a nearby house, he watched Boba take out a letter and hand it to Hiji. Your mother, she went far away to seek treatment for her illness. This is the letter she left for you. Hiji opened the letter and began reading. It wasn't long before tears streamed down his face. Mom. She left me behind. No, no. She just went to get better. Once the war is over, she'll come back for you. Boba said, trying to comfort him. After a moment of silence, Hiji seemed to make up his mind. I'm going to find her. He declared, his voice resolute. He slung his basket over his shoulder and dashed out of the village. Ah! That kid! Boba shook his head helplessly, preparing to leave as well. But as he turned around, he found himself face to face with a well-dressed foreigner watching him intently. A foreigner? Boba was surprised. He didn't want to get involved with someone who looked so out of place, so he simply glanced at Luo Qing before heading for the village entrance. Seeing Boba's clear desire to avoid interaction, Luo Qing chose not to press the matter. Suddenly, another samurai dressed in simpler attire, more akin to the locals, entered from the east road and nearly collided with Boba. Unlike the heavily armored shogunate soldiers from earlier, this man was dressed in plain cloth and appeared to be a fellow villager from Hiji. Boba, why are there so few people left in the village? Where have they gone? The newcomer asked. Chief Jinzhou, Boba responded, his tone uneasy. The Qujiao forces came earlier with a notice, saying they'd help evacuate us to Narukami Island. Many refugees went to their camp, and a few villagers decided to check it out as well. Boba's nervous expression made it clear he wasn't comfortable around the village chief. The shogunate forces? Ha! They're nothing but liars. Those men cannot be trusted. Jinzhou's hand tightened around his sword hilt as he cursed loudly. Then, turning back to Boba, he asked, where's Chuji's mother? She usually goes to the shrine to pray every day. I haven't seen her today. She? Boba hesitated, glancing down. I don't know. I haven't seen her today. Humph. She used to pray at the shrine every day, and now she's gotten lazy? With that attitude, how does she expect to earn the shogun's favor? This. Boba was at a loss for words, desperately searching for an excuse to escape the conversation. At that moment, the well-dressed foreigner walked up. Excuse me, Luo Qing said with a friendly smile, you mentioned a shrine to the almighty shogun. Could you show me the way? Chapter 62, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 62. Jinzhou followed the sound, turning to see a young man dressed in Snezhnayan formal robes standing before him, wearing a gentle smile. Ever since the thunderstorms and the war had overtaken Yashiori Island, few foreigners dared to venture here. Those who did, mostly adventurers, would leave in a hurry, not staying long. Yet, a group of Fatui had settled at the southern end of the island, their purpose unknown. Jinzhou raised an eyebrow. This is the shrine of the almighty shogun. What business does a foreigner like you have there? Luo Qing didn't rush his answer, his words slow and deliberate. Sightseeing. Is that a problem? Humph, follow me. Jinzhou sized up Luo Qing, noting the absence of any visible weapons or vision. Deciding the stranger posed no real threat, he led Luo Qing toward the shrine. Chuji's mother had disappeared, and perhaps this foreigner might fulfill his needs. Watching Luo Qing and Jinzhou leave the village together, Boba silently shook his head, bewildered by the foreigner's decision to seek out such trouble. The shrine was the very source of the lingering spirits, the root cause of the village's sickness, and yet this outsider willingly walked straight toward it. In the past, Boba might have tried to intervene, but now Jinzhou had fully lost his mind. To speak ill of the shrine in front of him was to invite a swift death. Sighing, Boba turned in the opposite direction, resuming his search for herbs in the hope of finding a cure for the villagers. Elsewhere. Luo Qing followed Jinzhou out of the village, walking southeast until they reached a cliff. There, on a stone pedestal, sat the shrine. A faint purple mist lingered around it, occasionally crackling with arcs of lightning. Offerings of jewelry and other valuables were scattered before it, with incense continuously burning, a sign that it received daily worship. Luo Qing studied the shrine, a strange sensation tugging at his thoughts. This is the shrine of the almighty shogun. Since you're here, why not pay your respects? Jinzhou settled beside the shrine, placing his unsheathed sword across his knees and began to clean it. Luo Qing glanced at him and then leaned closer. So, is your almighty shogun reliable? Jinzhou blinked. What do you mean? I'm asking if she's dependable. Why should I offer prayers if she's not going to deliver? A god who takes offerings should deliver results, don't you think? Frustration value +1 from Jinzhou. Humph, you'll find out if you pray. Jinzhou's tone held a hint of anger, his motions sharpening as he polished the blade. Touched a nerve, did I? Are you going to pray or not? Jinzhou's hand hovered over the hilt of his sword, the threat clear. Tisk, what if I choose not to? What are you planning to do? Luo Qing's smile didn't waver, unfazed by Jinzhou's attempt at intimidation. He was far more curious about the lingering will within the shrine. These ancient spirits lacked raw power but were remarkably skilled at manipulating mortals. Jinzhou hesitated, releasing his grip on the hilt. If you refuse, then leave. This place isn't meant for foreigners like you. Oh. Luo Qing was genuinely surprised. Hadn't Jinzhou been completely bewitched by the lingering spirits? Yet, he managed to hold back from violence. So, I'm free to go. Whether you stay or leave, it's none of my concern, Jinzhou replied, returning to polishing his sword. Outwardly, he was calm, but inside, his mind was a storm of turmoil. Bring him to me. I need him. The haunting whispers echoed ceaselessly in his thoughts, urging him to act. Seeing Jinzhou's apparent lack of aggression, Luo Qing thought he had missed his chance. With a slight shrug, he turned to leave. Just as he turned his back, Jinzhou's hand clenched around the hilt, and he lunged forward, aiming for Luo Qing's exposed neck. Jinzhou's body, strengthened by the power of the lingering spirits, was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Even the soldiers of the shogunate were no match for him. The foreigner before him was the perfect sacrifice, he had said so, and Jinzhou couldn't let him escape. But in that instant, Jinzhou felt something cold press against his chest. His frenzied thoughts froze. Disbelief filled his gaze as he looked down. A pale brown spear had pierced his chest, lifting him off the ground and leaving him suspended in mid-air. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Jinzhou stared at the Snezhnayan, whose once black eyes now glowed a deep golden, reminiscent of a serpent's gaze. Tisk, I thought you wouldn't go for it, Luo Qing's lips curled in a faint smile. Before Jinzhou could speak, Luo Qing flicked the spear, sending him crashing back in front of the shrine. How, did you know? Jinzhou struggled to rise, his back pressed against the shrine, fury and fear mingling in his eyes. He still couldn't understand how the foreigner had managed to summon the spear or when it had pierced him. Just a hunch. Luo Qing stepped closer, his tone indifferent. If you hadn't attacked, I really wouldn't have had a reason to help Lumen deal with you. Ha! You think killing me will save them? His power has enveloped the whole of Yashiori Island. You'll all become his sacrifices. Jinzhou's voice was filled with deranged fervor. I think you misunderstand. Luo Qing's voice was calm, almost cold. You and they, none of you matter to me. With that, he drove his spear downward, ending Jinzhou's life before the shrine. Tisk. Teresa and Scaramouche weren't wrong. This really is a cursed land. Luo Qing shook his head, returning the spear to his inventory without a second glance at the body, now abandoned at the shrine's steps. He turned away, heading back to the Fatui camp. This man, Jinzhou, would have died anyway when Lumen arrived. It was only a matter of who dealt the final blow. Hiji village was nothing but a tragic footnote of the war. The resistance forces from Watatsumi Island had shattered the warding stones, releasing the lingering spirits and cursing the struggling village of Hiji with sickness and death. Yet, they still believed they were the heroes, liberating the island's people. Meanwhile, those who placed their hope in the shogunate's supposed aid had no idea that the rescue was merely a cover to quarantine and eliminate them, preventing the sickness from spreading to Narukami Island and jeopardizing the Tenryou Commission's stability. As for the villagers who remained, barely clinging to life, Jinzhou had already sacrificed them to the lingering spirits haunting the shrine. By the time the game events occurred, the only ones to have survived from Hiji village were Hiji and perhaps his mother, who had left for Sumeru. The memories of those in-game tragedies surfaced, making Luo Qing feel a chill of disgust. Chapter 63, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 63. Back at the camp. Although Luo Qing claimed he was just going for a walk, Natalia and the others immediately sensed that their commander had encountered something unsettling outside. Lord Luo Qing, did you see something unpleasant while you were out? Natalia asked softly. She had served as Luo Qing's personal assistant long enough to recognize that it was rare to see him in such a somber mood. Nothing much, just watched a tragedy play out, Luo Qing replied, shaking his head. Then he added, Natalia, tell the others to change their outfits tomorrow. We're going to dress up as adventurers. Natalia looked puzzled. Lord Luo Qing, aren't we heading to Narukami Island? Why do we need to disguise ourselves as adventurers all of a sudden? No reason, just making a detour to go fishing, Luo Qing said calmly. The next morning. Although it was technically morning, the ever-present thunderstorms blanketing Yashiori Island blurred the line between day and night. The non-stop storms kept Natalia and the others from getting a decent night's sleep, leaving them groggy when they woke. It felt like they could still hear strange voices echoing in their minds, a sensation that made them marvel at how the Fatui's vanguard troops stationed here managed to endure. The camp had a few spare adventurer outfits, and after dressing up, Natalia's group looked reasonably convincing as adventurers, at least enough not to be mistaken for dangerous members of the Fatui. Lord Luo Qing, where are we headed now? Natalia asked. The original plan was to travel to the Qiuzhou encampment. The Tenryu Commission had deep ties with the Fatui, and through their assistance, they were supposed to reach Inajima City. However, with Luo Qing mentioning a change in plans last night, Natalia wanted to confirm. We're still going to the Qiuzhou encampment, but remember, we're adventurers from the Adventurers Guild. We got stranded by the storm, so we're heading to the Qiuzhou encampment to ask for help, Luo Qing reminded them sternly. He glanced over and saw Teresa teasing a small electro-slime with her Nika weed lamp, his brow furrowing. Teresa, do you think guild adventurers would play with electro-slimes like that? Ah, sorry, Lord Luo Qing. Teresa quickly pulled the electro-slime back into the lamp, stowing it away in her pack and falling in line behind the others. Have you all hidden your weapons? Luo Qing turned his gaze toward Natalia and the others. They didn't have access to a system inventory like he did, so the modern weapons Luo Qing had issued to them were usually kept on their person, making them stand out a bit among the Fatui. They're all hidden, Lord Luo Qing, inside the false compartments, Natalia said, patting the black, long leather case she was carrying. All right, let's move out, Luo Qing nodded, leading them toward the Qiuzhou encampment. As for Hiji village, Luo Qing had dealt with Jinzhou for them, and whatever fate awaited the remaining villagers was in their own hands now. The group followed the cliffs along Musujin Gorge, heading in the direction of Nizuchi Beach. The dense electro-energy in the gorge made Natalia and the others uncomfortable. A single glance at the glowing purple sea below sent chills down their spines, as if some unseen presence weighed heavily upon them. Combined with the frequent lightning strikes, they found themselves constantly grumbling about how uninhabitable the island was, wondering how the people of Inajima managed to survive here. Fortunately, the thunderstorms only affected Yashiori Island. Once they left its shores, the weather improved considerably on Nizuchi Beach, allowing them to relax a little. Even Teresa, who had spent a whole year stationed alone at Gaiun Stone Forest, admitted she was grateful she hadn't been reassigned to Inajima. Even the isolated Gaiun seemed 100 times better than this cursed island. At that moment, the battlefield at Nizuchi Beach, where the shogunate forces and the resistance frequently clashed, appeared abandoned, no sign of life. In the distance, Tatarasuna was heavily fortified, with shogunate soldiers visible in the watchtowers. You all better not mess this up, Luo Qing warned them again as they neared the shogunate's defensive lines. We're adventurers. Got it. If his subordinates slipped up, he would lose his leverage over Qiuzhou Takayuki. Don't worry, Lord Luo Qing. We've got this. Teresa pounded her chest confidently. Luo Qing glanced at Teresa, feeling she was the least trustworthy of the group. Soon, they reached the defensive barricades of the Qiuzhou camp, where armored shogunate soldiers approached to intercept them, blocking their path. Who are you? Where do you come from? One of the soldiers barked. Greetings, sir. We're adventurers from the Adventurers Guild. Our ship was caught in the storm and ran aground. We heard the Qiuzhou camp might be able to help us get to Narukami Island, Luo Qing explained with perfect deference, exuding the air of a genuine adventurer. Adventurers. The guard eyed the group from head to toe. 5 adventurers, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed appropriately in the guild's distinctive green attire. However, what caught his attention were the large cases each member carried. What's in those cases? The guard asked, pointing to the large one slung over Igor's shoulder. Oh, just excavation tools for archaeological adventures, Luo Qing replied with a smile. You there, open it up, the guard ordered, pointing at Igor. Of course, sir, Igor said respectfully, setting the case down and opening it. Inside were various digging tools. Igor had even tilted the interior compartment to make it look deeper than it was. All right, move along, the guard said, casting a cursory glance at the contents before waving them through. Given their foreign appearances, they were clearly not Watatsumai rebels. The group had just passed the fortifications when another soldier blocked their path. "You came from Yashiori Island?" he asked. "Yes, we did." "Why?" Luo Qing replied, feigning confusion. "Just as I thought. Yashiori Island." The soldier's expression darkened as he scrutinized them. "Have any of you been feeling dizzy, nauseous, or heard voices in your heads recently?" "Well." Luo Qing played along, putting on a serious face. "Yes, sir." "How did you know?" "That's exactly why we wanted to get back to Inajima City as soon as possible to find a cure." "I see." The guard nodded, pointing toward a small island in the distance. "Head to the garrison over there. A ship will be arranged to take you to Narukami Island for treatment." "Understood." "Understood, thank you, sir." Luo Qing nodded repeatedly, quickly leading Natalia and the others in the direction of the Kyujiao garrison, fearing the soldier might change his mind. Once Luo Qing's group was out of earshot, the two shogunate soldiers began whispering to each other. "They said they were adventurers, so why did you send them to that ship too? What's the problem?" "Lord Jinsaijan said that anyone showing signs of spirit corruption can't be allowed back to Narukami Island. If those people make it back alive, and Lord Takayuki blames us, do you think we can handle the fallout?" "But what's there to but about? It's always been like this. If it's not them, it's us. Why else do you think the rebels are fighting us?" Yet. Chapter 64, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 64-100 PS. Bonus Chapter. Ever since the explosion, Tatarasuna had become a desolate place, void of human activity, save for a few Fatui scouting squads stationed there for reasons unknown. Most of those stationed here were underlings left behind by the doctor. Unlike Child or La Signora, the doctor wasn't the type to be reasonable, so unless absolutely necessary, Luo Qing preferred not to cross paths with him. However, judging by the nagging notifications from the system's frustration value logs, the doctor seemed to be aware of Luo Qing's presence. Thankfully, he hadn't come knocking just yet. Skirting the northern beach of Tatarasuna and avoiding the Mikage furnace, Luo Qing's group finally arrived at the small island where the Kyujiao encampment was located by midday. As a forward base of the shogunate army, the Kyujiao encampment wasn't a place that could be freely accessed, so it was no surprise that the group was stopped by the guards. "This is a military zone. Civilians are not permitted." The guard swung his spear, blocking their path. He eyed their green-clad outfits suspiciously, automatically assuming they were adventurers. "Sir, we're adventurers who escaped from Yashiori Island. The soldiers at Tatarasuna told us there's a ship here that can take us back to Narukami Island, so we came here seeking passage," Luo Qing said politely, making sure to emphasize Yashiori Island to link them with the fleeing refugees. "Adventurers from Yashiori Island?" The guard looked troubled, clearly unsure whether to let them through. "Wait here. I'll report this," he said, running back inside the camp with his spear. A few moments later, he returned with a complicated expression. "There's a ship departing for Narukami Island tonight. Head to the eastern side of the island. A group of refugees is already waiting there. You'll be able to leave with them." "Thank you, sir. We'll head over right away," Luo Qing said with feigned enthusiasm, glancing in the direction the guard pointed before exchanging a knowing look with Natalia and the others. The group made their way toward the east side of the island. Once they were a safe distance away, the impatience among the group bubbled over. "Lord Luo Qing, why are we pretending to be adventurers? These outfits are so ugly." Teresa grumbled. "And those Inajima soldiers? They looked at us like dead men walking. I bet they're planning to screw us over." Teresa's words dripped with frustration, though she lacked the intellect to fully grasp Luo Qing's plans. Being kept in the dark just made her feel even more like a fool. Luo Qing glanced back at her, his tone carrying a sense of gentle reprimand. "Teresa, have you ever considered that even if I explained it to you, you wouldn't understand?" Frustration value +1 from Teresa. Teresa stood there, dumbfounded, wanting to argue back but unsure of what to say. "Isn't this just bullying a fool?" she thought. Pouting, she shuffled to the back of the group, sneaking out her little electro slime to play with. "At least you, my little treasure, care about me," she mused. "Unlike that heartless Luo Qing." Luo Qing didn't bother with Teresa anymore, knowing that her carefree nature would soon bring her back to her usual self. It wasn't worth worrying about, especially since her emotional stability seemed questionable at best. He couldn't help but wonder if this was a common trait among Electro-Chechen mages. The group made their way to the east side of the island, approaching a rickety wooden dock where a crowd of refugees had already gathered. A few heavily armored shogunate soldiers were stationed around them, seemingly preventing them from leaving the area. Most of the refugees were able-bodied men, with a few elderly and women mixed in. Almost all had come here after seeing the Kyujiao clan's aid announcement, hoping to board a ship back to Narukami Island. After all, Narukami Island was the only relatively safe place left in the Inajima archipelago. The shogunate, with the legendary Raiden shogun at its helm, still held some appeal. No one wanted to join the resistance at Watatsumi Island and risk being labeled a traitor. Lord Luo Qing, this doesn't look like a rescue mission, more like they're herding prisoners, Igor whispered. As a trained intelligence officer, he immediately sensed something was off about the situation. You're right. They never intended to help anyone. You'll see soon enough, Luo Qing replied coolly, quickening his pace toward the soldiers. What's your business here? One of the armored soldiers asked warily as Luo Qing approached. Their hands instinctively moved toward their swords, ready for any trouble. Sensing the tension, Natalia and the others also tensed, ready to act at a moment's notice. If these soldiers drew their weapons, they wouldn't even need Luo Qing to deal with them. Sir, we're adventurers who escaped from Yashiori Island. The soldiers at the camp told us to come here, saying there's a ship that can take us to Narukami Island. Luo Qing feigned fear as he spoke. Adventurers, hey! The soldier scrutinized them, noting their green adventurer outfits. Except for the large black cases a few of them carried, they didn't look out of place. Fine. Stay here and don't wander off. The ship will depart at dusk. Someone will come to take you to Narukami Island then. The soldier seemed disinterested, having already resigned himself to following orders. He had no reason to second-guess the decision of his superiors regarding the fate of these people. Compassion wouldn't get him far in this world. Once the group was herded into the dock area, the armored soldiers continued to block the exit, preventing anyone from leaving with the excuse that they couldn't wander around. Though some refugees found the situation suspicious, they had already reached the dock. They had no choice but to wait patiently for the ship to depart. Surely, the shogunate wouldn't intentionally harm them, right? As the sun set, painting the sea with a golden hue, the soldiers guarding the dock exchanged glances. One by one, they moved through the crowd, opening the ship's gangplank and directing the refugees to board. Luo Qing and his group remained at the back, but as they neared the ship, Luo Qing caught sight of something at the rear of the vessel, a small lifeboat hanging off the side. Judging by its size, it was just large enough to hold the soldiers. Did you see that? Luo Qing subtly nodded toward the lifeboat, drawing Igor's attention to it. As the sharpest mind of the group, Igor quickly understood what was going on. He met Luo Qing's gaze and nodded slightly. When we're aboard, keep an eye on those soldiers. Make sure they don't pull any tricks. Understood. Luo Qing whispered. Yes, Lord Luo Qing, Igor replied quietly. Once all the refugees were aboard, the soldiers did a head count, ensuring no one had slipped away. Satisfied, they raised the anchor and set sail. Seeing the boat depart brought smiles to the refugees' faces. The thought of soon returning to Narukami Island filled them with hope. Maybe the shogunate soldiers aren't so bad after all, they thought. At least they're helping the refugees. Chapter 65, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 65. From Kanazuka to the harbor at Ritou, the journey at sea could take anywhere from a day to several, depending on the winds and weather. Once they were at sea, if the ship were to sink due to a storm, it would be nearly impossible for ordinary people to survive. The refugees, overwhelmed by the joy of returning to Narukami Island, didn't notice that once they had reached deep waters, the samurai who were supposed to escort them all retreated into the ship's cabin. Even the one steering the ship used the excuse of changing shifts to enter the cabin, locking the door behind him, leaving the refugees unaware. Inside the cabin. After the helmsman entered, the samurai exchanged glances, retrieving bundles of explosives from the cargo barrels, stacking them along both sides of the ship. There were enough explosives to blow the wooden vessel into pieces. Once the fuses were set, the samurai moved toward the stern of the ship, planning to depart on a lifeboat once the fuse was lit. Their mission was simple: under the pretense of escorting refugees to Narukami Island, they were to gather them mid-journey and sink the ship. If anyone discovered the plan, they would simply blame it on the Coral Palace rebels. "Sir, do we really have to go through with this?" One of the younger samurai holding the fuse seemed hesitant, looking at the older samurai, clearly their leader. "Are you questioning orders? This is a direct command from the family head. If you let these people return, we'll lose our heads instead." The elder samurai snapped. "But, wasn't the whole point of joining the army to protect the people?" The younger one muttered. "And now you suddenly remember that? If you want to protect them so much, why don't you join them and drown in the sea?" The elder samurai snatched the fuse from him and was about to ignite it when something unexpected happened. A small electro slime landed on his hand. "An electro slime? How did this?" Before he could finish his sentence, the slime opened its mouth and shot an electric orb straight at his face. At the same time, more electro slimes emerged from the shadows around the cabin, carefully avoiding the explosives and surrounding the samurai, forcing them back toward the stern. "Monsters! Be careful!" The elder samurai shouted, though his mind was foggy from the impact of the electric orb. He assumed the slimes had accidentally wandered into the ship. Just then, a girl's voice echoed from behind them. "Killing your own people? Inajima is worse than Snezhnia. If I'd known, I wouldn't have bothered coming here." The samurai turned to see a young girl, a faint purple lantern in her hand, shaking her head lightly. You're Fatui!" one of the samurai exclaimed. "Correct. But even if you guessed right, you're still in for some pain." Teresa giggled, covering her mouth with a hand. "After all, I just got scolded by my master, so I'm in a pretty foul mood right now." As she finished speaking, lightning sparked in Teresa's hand, and she charged at the samurai. Having served in the scouting squads for years, and being capable of taking down entire hilly churl camps alone in Gaiun Stone Forest, Teresa's combat prowess was no joke. Even if she were up against Liyue's Kixing or Lumen, she could still hold her own. Dispatching a few Inajima samurai was child's play. Her only concern was making sure to control the lightning and the slimes carefully so as not to accidentally ignite the explosives. It only took a few moves for Teresa to subdue the samurai, leaving them lying on the ground, twitching in pain. At that moment, the cabin door opened, and Natalia and Igor entered, locking the door behind them. Natalia frowned as she saw the samurai lying there, frothing at the mouth. "Didn't Lord Luo Qing say not to be too rough? What have you done?" "I couldn't help it," Teresa replied, feigning innocence with a playful tone. "I've been a little angry lately. Luo Qing asked us to interrogate them, to find out who gave the orders, and to leave behind some evidence. But look at them now." Natalia sighed, feeling exasperated. It would be difficult to interrogate them when they were barely conscious. "Oh, come on. I didn't hit them that hard. They should wake up soon." "Hey, you! Wake up, stop twitching." Teresa crouched down, slapping one of the samurai lightly on the face. After a few slaps, a young samurai finally regained consciousness, gasping for breath as he sat up. You're Fatui. Well, guess what? My lord has some questions for you. I suggest you answer truthfully or we'll toss you overboard to feed the fish." Teresa taunted, her tone light and playful as if throwing people into the sea was just another part of her day. Suddenly, a thought crossed her mind, and she turned to Natalia, asking, "Shouldn't we let the refugees listen in on the interrogation too? It might make these guys more likely to confess if the civilians hear them." Luo Qing said there were too many refugees to control. "As long as we have these guys as leverage, it'll be enough. When we get to shore, someone will be there to take them away," Natalia explained patiently. Teresa blinked blankly. "I don't get it. Just stick to the interrogation. Ask him who gave the orders." "Oh, I get that part. Leave it to me." Teresa beamed, then immediately slapped the young samurai across the face again. "Speak. Who gave you the order to drown those refugees? Why are the Fatui asking about this? What does this have to do with you?" The young samurai muttered through bloodied lips, his eyes darting nervously. It seemed that even he felt guilty about the planned massacre. "Does it matter? We help when we see injustice. What's your problem, hey? You don't like it?" Teresa snapped, slapping him again before he could respond. Another samurai, just regaining consciousness, was about to stand when his face met the same stinging slap. Dazed, he heard Teresa's voice shouting again. "Speak! Who gave you the order? It was late into the night. On the deck, many of the refugees had fallen asleep despite the chaos of their minds, their faces twisted in pain due to the lingering effects of the Tatarigami's curse. Some even woke suddenly, coughing up blood. Seeing that it was time, Luo Qing signaled to Sergei to continue steering the ship while he descended into the cabin to check on the interrogation. As he entered, he found the samurai huddled in a corner, their faces swollen like pigs' heads, trembling in fear. Standing over them, Teresa had her hands on her hips, impatiently tapping her foot on the floor. She looked as though she were ready to slap anyone who so much as breathed the wrong way. Chapter 66, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 66. Did they confess? Luo Qing glanced at the samurai lying on the ground, his expression indifferent. The order came directly from Kyujou Takayuki, head of the Kyujou clan. There was no written command, only verbal instructions, Natalia reported respectfully, handing over the interrogation notes to Luo Qing. A verbal order, hey. That complicates things, Luo Qing sighed, feeling a bit of a headache. Without a written order, he'd have to rely on these samurai as leverage against Kyujou Takayuki, which was more troublesome than he liked. Teresa, come over here. What is it, Lord Luo Qing? At his call, the fierce expression on Teresa's face immediately softened. Rubbing her hands together, she rushed to stand before him, expecting praise for her earlier work. You'll take them on the lifeboat and head straight to Inajima City. Find a nearby outpost and lock them up. We'll meet up after we arrive. What? Just me again? Teresa was taken aback. Is there a problem? No problem. Teresa's shoulders slumped, grumbling internally. Why is it always me stuck with all the dirty work? Is this what being at the bottom of the team feels like? With great reluctance, she threw the bound samurai onto the lifeboat, hopping on after them. As she set off, she shouted back, Lord Luo Qing, don't miss me too much. Then she sailed off toward Inajima City. The small lifeboat, which didn't rely on wind for movement, would reach Inajima City much faster than the larger ship. By the time she arrived, Luo Qing and the others probably wouldn't have even reached Ritou yet. Back on the ship, after a full day without seeing their samurai guards, the refugees began to grow anxious. When someone discovered the cabin door was unlocked, they went inside to investigate. After confirming that all the samurai were missing, panic spread among the refugees, many fearing that the curses from Yashiori Island had followed them aboard. But regardless of their fear, turning back wasn't an option. Eventually, someone took control of the helm, and they continued sailing toward Ritou. 2 days later, the ship finally arrived at the port of Ritou. Ritou's port was managed by the Kenjo Commission, one of Inajima's 3 governing commissions, similar to Liyue's Kixing, each responsible for a different aspect of Inajima's affairs. The Tenryou Commission oversaw law enforcement and military matters. Except for the Raiden Shogun's direct forces, such as the Shogunate and Kamisato Ayato's Shu Matsuban, all military forces were under the Tenryou Commission's command. The Kenjo Commission was responsible for Inajima's finances and trade, as well as issuing travel permits for visitors, making them a key part of regulating Inajima's interactions with outsiders. The final branch, the Yashiro Commission, handled cultural matters, festivals, and religious rites, and though beloved by the people, it was the weakest of the 3 in terms of political power. Unfortunately, before Luo Qing's arrival, the Fatui had already infiltrated 2 of the commissions. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they had significant control over Inajima's governance. Both the Tenryou and Kenjo commissions had close ties with the Fatui, allowing the Fatui to continue sending agents and resources into Inajima, even after the Sakoko decree was enacted. As a representative of La Signora, Luo Qing's identity had already been prepared in advance before his arrival. So, while the other refugees faced strict scrutiny from the Kenjo Commission, Luo Qing's group merely flashed their identification to a local official and were quietly allowed to pass through the port. It was evening by the time they arrived, and Luo Qing found a small inn for them to stay in, deciding to head to Inajima City the next day. After finally feeling the normal atmosphere of Inajima, Natalia and the others, with Luo Qing's permission, headed out to explore the streets, leaving him alone in the inn. Later that night, Luo Qing lay down on the tatami, preparing to take a short nap to recover from the exhaustion of their sea journey. Just as he was starting to relax, he heard the faint sound of footsteps on the roof, as if something soft was lightly stepping on the tiles. To ordinary people, such quiet sounds might have gone unnoticed. But to Luo Qing, who needed rest, the noise was a bit too distracting. Given his special position with the Fatui, Luo Qing couldn't afford to let his guard down, so he opened his eyes. In a flash of golden light, he teleported onto the roof. Surprisingly, the roof was empty. Whoever had been there seemed to have already left. Who the heck runs around on rooftops in the middle of the night? Don't they know people are trying to sleep? Luo Qing grumbled, frowning as he teleported back inside. Just as he was about to lie down again, a heavy knock came at the door. Who is it? Luo Qing's brow furrowed further. Delivery from Nico Delivery. Sir, you have a package. A muffled, feminine voice came from the other side of the door. A delivery. Luo Qing was momentarily confused. I just arrived in Ritou today. How could someone have sent a delivery to my inn already? Feeling a bit suspicious, Luo Qing walked to the door. He activated his Time Zero ability before opening it. In the next moment, he saw a young girl with light brown hair standing nervously outside the door, holding a large cardboard box. What set her apart from a normal girl were the fluffy cat ears atop her head, along with two long tails swaying behind her. Even her little feet, peeking out from beneath her long socks, were covered in soft fur, resembling paws. Hey! Luo Qing was shocked, no, delighted. A cat girl. Ah! The girl jumped slightly, startled by how suddenly the door had opened. She had been standing right in front of it the whole time, but hadn't even seen it move. Sir, I'm Kirara from Nico Delivery. Here to deliver your package. Please sign for it. And if you could, kindly give me a 5-star review, thank you. Kirara held the package out to Luo Qing with both hands, along with a slip for him to sign, her face lighting up with a sweet smile. Even her furry ears twitched a little, adding to her charm. This was her signature move. Customers usually couldn't resist giving her a 5-star rating after seeing her cheerful and adorable expression. Hey! Luo Qing sucked in a breath. This is the first time I've ever met a cat girl. Why do I have zero resistance to this? Could it be that I really am? But professionalism comes first. As an executive, Luo Qing still had discipline. Instead of signing, he shook his head slightly and looked at Kirara with a meaningful gaze. Let's put the signing aside for now. Tell me, was it you running around on the rooftops earlier, keeping me from getting any sleep? Kirara's bright smile froze in place. She had been extra careful not to make any noise while on the roof. How had this man still heard her? Looks like your 5-star rating might be in jeopardy, Luo Qing said, his tone full of implications. Kirara, you don't want to lose that 5-star review, do you? Chapter 67, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 67. Sir, this. Kirara stammered, unsure of how to explain herself. She was used to delivering packages from rooftops. It was a habit by now. It was the first time someone had heard her footsteps and actually complained about the noise. 5-star ratings were critical to her performance as a courier. If she didn't get enough 5-star reviews each month, there was a risk she might get fired from her job. And if she lost this job, she'd have to return to the wilderness, back to being the great yokai people whispered about. Every 5-star review was a lifeline for her. Look at her, she's so scared, her tail's drooping down. Let's set aside the rating for now. Are you sure this delivery is meant for me? Seeing Kirara's anxious expression, Luo Qing sighed and decided to shift the conversation. 11:45. Kirara took a half step back, tilting her head to check the number on the door. She then compared it with the delivery slip, nodding after confirming. Yes, sir, this is your delivery. 4. Mr. Luo Qing, right? That's me. Luo Qing's brows furrowed slightly. He'd only arrived in Ritou less than half a day ago. Other than his subordinates, who else could have tracked his movements so closely? All right, hand it over. Certainly, sir. Just sign here, please. Luo Qing took the package from Kirara and signed the delivery slip. He was about to shut the door and return inside when he noticed Kirara was still standing there, unmoving, with no intention of leaving. Do you need something else? Kirara hesitated, but suddenly gathered her courage. She bowed deeply at a perfect 90-degree angle and blurted out. Mr. Luo Qing, I'm really sorry for disturbing your sleep earlier with the noise on the roof. Luo Qing blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected her to bow and apologize so directly. Oh, I wasn't too bothered by it. Before he could finish, Kirara raised her head abruptly, her cat ears twitching slightly. Her eyes were wide and pleading. So, could you please give me a 5-star review? It's very important to me. Luo Qing was a little surprised by her insistence. Do delivery workers in Inajima really take ratings this seriously? An amused idea suddenly popped into his head. Kirara, right? Yes, Mr. Luo Qing. Kirara nodded vigorously, her fluffy ears bouncing up and down. I just have a few questions for you. Answer them, and I'll give you that 5-star rating. Hey! Before she could process his request, Luo Qing had already turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open for her. Despite feeling a strange sense of unease, Kirara's instincts told her she could handle herself. As a member of the yokai race, her escape skills were top-notch, and she doubted this man could pose any real threat to her. Cautiously, she poked her head through the doorway, sniffed the air, and then tiptoed inside. Her soft paw pads made no noise whatsoever. Excuse me. Entering the room, she saw Luo Qing already seated at a low table, and she took a seat across from him. Her two long, fluffy tails swayed restlessly, revealing her nervousness. What does Mr. Luo Qing want to ask? She murmured softly. Who requested this delivery? Luo Qing asked as he began unboxing the package. Well. Kirara picked up the delivery slip from the table and scanned it, trying to recall the details. I remember now. The client was anonymous. They didn't leave a name. Luo Qing opened the package to find a wooden box inside. In the box was a small, neatly cut piece of crystal marrow. Anonymous, hey? And it was a man. What about his hair color? Well. Kirara scratched the back of her head, trying to remember. She handled so many deliveries each day that recalling one specific customer wasn't easy. I think, he had blonde hair. And he wasn't from Inajima. A blonde foreigner. Luo Qing confirmed. Given that the traveler, Lumen, hadn't arrived in Inajima yet, the description could only match one person, that particular diplomat. Yes, yes. Kirara nodded enthusiastically, her cat ears bobbing up and down. Luo Qing's gaze lingered on her twitching ears for a moment, suddenly feeling an irresistible urge to pet them. All right. Did he say anything when he placed the order? Kirara scratched her head again but seemed to draw a blank this time. I don't think he said much. He just insisted it had to be delivered today, and even paid extra more for the priority delivery. Today, hey. Luo Qing frowned slightly, eyeing the crystal marrow in the wooden box. Is this the Shu Matsuban's way of warning me? I barely set foot in Inajima, and they're already keeping tabs on me. Where did the delivery originate? Right here in Ritou. I had just arrived to make a long-distance delivery when that client approached me. All right, I've finished my questions. Then, my 5-star review. Kirara asked timidly. No more running around on rooftops at night, all right. Luo Qing picked up the review slip, marked 5 stars, and handed it back to Kirara. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Luo Qing. I hope you have a great day. I'll be on my way now. Seeing the genuine 5-star rating on the slip, Kirara beamed, preparing to leave. But just as she was about to stand, Luo Qing's voice turned cold. No. You can't leave. Hey. Kirara froze, half standing, unsure whether to sit back down. Cautiously, she asked. Is there something else, Mr. Luo Qing? Aren't you with a delivery service? I have something I'd like to send as well. After a moment's thought, Luo Qing decided it was only polite to return the favor. Since someone had sent him a gift, it wouldn't be right not to reciprocate. Wait a moment. I have a package I'd like you to deliver. Oh, okay. Relieved that it was just another delivery, Kirara sat back down, folding her legs neatly beneath her. She watched Luo Qing curiously as he rummaged through his belongings. After a while, Luo Qing finally pulled out a black disc, a familiar item he had once sent to Ningguang. It was the same, his very own recording of the most dazzling ethnic wind. Deliver this to the Yashiro Commission. Make sure it's signed by the head of the Kamisato family personally. Luo Qing set the disc on the table. Kirara picked it up, examining it with curiosity while mumbling under her breath. Fragile item. Yashiro Commission, long-distance delivery. Mr. Luo Qing, would you like this to be anonymous too? No need. Just let them know it's from me. Luo Qing smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye. Chapter 68, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 68. The night passed. As the entity overseeing Ritou's trade and tax collection, the Kenjo Commission held full authority over all duties imposed on goods. They could set the tax rates as high as they pleased. Since the Fatui's infiltration, this taxing authority had effectively fallen under their control. Even if the Fatui requested that taxes be collected in crystal marrow instead of mora, the Kenjo Commission had no choice but to comply, sometimes even hiking the rates further to squeeze the merchants of Ritou dry. Before leaving Ritou, as Rosalina's stand-in, Luo Qing had to make a formal appearance at the Kenjo Commission. He needed to pass on Rosalina's message, instructing them to increase the tax on crystal marrow. With the intensifying war between the resistance and the shogunate, the demand for delusions had surged. The doctor, who was studying the creation of delusions, wouldn't miss such an ideal opportunity for his experiments. The more people who used delusions, the richer the research data he could gather. Luo Qing wasn't sure how Rosalind had managed to form an alliance with the doctor, but he didn't care. He had little fondness for mad scientists, as long as that particular doctor didn't cause him trouble. The Kenjo Commission's domain, which stretched over nearly half of Ritou, was a show of wealth and influence. As Rosalind had described, Luo Qing and his team approached the entrance of the Kenjo Commission. With a discreet display of his Fatui insignia, the guards gave a nod and escorted them inside. Following the guards, they were led through the front hall of the Kenjo Commission. Inside, the servants gracefully prepared tea and snacks, treating them with a level of respect that left Natalia and the others puzzled. After all, in most other nations, the Fatui's reputation was synonymous with villainy. Stories of Fatui agents kidnapping naughty children were a staple of bedtime warnings. Even in Liyue, common folk would avoid them on sight. When had they ever been treated like honored guests? As they pondered, a middle-aged man entered the room. He quickly gestured for the guards and servants to leave, sealing the door behind him. "A pleasure to meet you. I am Iragi Chisato's father, Iragi Shinsuke, and I hope my hospitality will be to your satisfaction, Mr. Luo Qing," he said with a respectful bow. The surprising display of courtesy from a high-ranking official left Natalia and the others astonished. Luo Qing, however, remained unfazed. Calmly, he met Shinsuke's eyes and asked, "You know me?" Shinsuke offered a polite smile. "Lady Rosalind informed me in advance that another harbinger would take her place to continue our cooperation with the Kenjo Commission. May I ask what instructions you have for us?" "I see." Luo Qing raised a brow, mildly impressed by the deference. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of leverage Rosalind had used to gain this level of obedience from Iragi Shinsuke. Surely, it couldn't have been whips and candle wax. "It's nothing major. We just need you to increase the collection of crystal marrow. Our purchasing price will remain unchanged, but we require more shipments. Everything else will stay the same," Luo Qing said plainly. He suddenly felt someone's gaze upon him. Opening his emotion tracking tool, he scanned for any eavesdroppers hidden in the room. "Would you like to use the Let's Me Out Together item card? Possible targets: Natalia, Igor, Sergei, Iragi Shinsuke, Iragi Chisato." "Ah, Mr. Iragi." Luo Qing paused, speaking thoughtfully. "The young lady eavesdropping must be your daughter." "Eavesdropping?" Iragi Shinsuke looked stunned, then his gaze shifted to the folding screen behind him. His expression grew stern. "Chisato, eavesdropping is unbefitting of a noble woman." A few seconds later, a refined young woman in a kimono stepped out from behind the screen. She offered a graceful bow to everyone. "Apologies. I am Iragi Chisato, greetings to all." Turning to her father, she protested, "Father, I just happened to come looking for you. I had no intention of eavesdropping." "Well, since you're here, you might as well meet Mr. Luo Qing, our esteemed guest," Shinsuke said with a smile, waving her over as if to demonstrate that his daughter was trustworthy. "Yes. Greetings, Mr. Luo Qing," Chisato said, bowing slightly. She looked at him, meeting his eyes briefly before quickly averting her gaze. She couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze was strangely familiar, not the look of a stranger meeting someone for the first time, but more like someone who had been expecting her. Startled by the odd familiarity, she took a small step back, lowering her head to avoid his eyes. Of course, Luo Qing had never heard of Iragi Chisato before. His curiosity stemmed purely from the peculiar situation, and since Iragi Shinsuke seemed unconcerned, he saw no need to dig deeper. He handed Shinsuke a letter detailing the required quantities of crystal marrow. It came directly from the doctor in Snezhnia and had passed through Rosaline's hands before reaching him. The specific amounts are listed in this letter. Since Miss Iragi seems to have other matters to attend to, and I have more business to handle myself, I'll take my leave. He glanced briefly at Chisato, who was half hidden behind the folding screen, before turning to leave. Iragi Shinsuke's eyes followed Luo Qing to the doorway, and then, unexpectedly, he broke into a broad smile. I had hoped Mr. Luo Qing would stay in Ritou for a few days so we could discuss our partnership in detail, but if you are pressed for time, I won't insist. Chisato, escort Mr. Luo Qing out for me, will you? Hey! Chisato's eyes widened in surprise. Why was her father asking her to escort his guest when it was clearly his responsibility? Is that all right with you, Chisato? Shinsuke asked again, his gaze softening. Yes. Yes, father. Mr. Luo Qing, this way, please. Chisato responded hurriedly. She shot a quick glance at Luo Qing, her thoughts racing. Her father had always been meticulous about who he associated her with, prioritizing family reputation above all else. Yet now, he wanted her to accompany this stranger. Could it be? But I already have someone I care for. Why can't father understand? Her face flushed slightly, and she hastened her steps, purposefully keeping a safe distance from Luo Qing to avoid any unwanted attention. Meanwhile, Luo Qing was equally bewildered. All I did was look at his daughter, and now he's sending her to escort me out? Is he really so eager to marry her off? Nevertheless, since things had progressed this way, Luo Qing decided to take advantage of it. She could be quite useful. Chapter 69, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 69. On the way out of the Kenjo Commission, Iragi Chisato maintained a cautious distance ahead of Luo Qing, guiding the way with careful, hurried steps. Even when Luo Qing asked her something, she would merely turn her head slightly to respond before immediately turning away, refusing to look him in the eyes. It was as if he were some rogue samurai who might abduct innocent women. Mr. Luo Qing, this is as far as I'll escort you. I look forward to meeting you again. With that, Chisato tried to leave, but just as she was about to take a step, Luo Qing's gaze shifted slightly, and Natalia and the others blocked her path, preventing her from going any further. Is there something else you need, Mr. Luo Qing? Chisato turned back with a forced smile, her heart pounding with unease. This is Ritou. Right outside the Kenjo Commission. He wouldn't dare try anything here, would he? There is a favor I wish to ask. Would Miss Chisato be willing to assist me? Well. Chisato hesitated, her gaze dropping as she answered softly, what does Mr. Luo Qing need? In the coming days, a blonde foreign girl and her flying pet will arrive in Ritou. For certain reasons, your father will likely try to keep them here on the island. I'd like you to help them leave Ritou and inform me when they do. Could you do that? This. Chisato's nerves eased when she realized Luo Qing wasn't asking anything inappropriate. Regaining some composure, she asked calmly, aren't you and my father allies? Why would you? Luo Qing smiled faintly. Miss Chisato, my cooperation is with the Kenjo Commission on behalf of my superior. This request, however, is from me personally. I see, but why should I help you, Mr. Luo Qing? Chisato asked with a hint of defiance. Luo Qing paused for a couple of seconds. Well, Miss Chisato, you wouldn't want your father to find out about those secret letters you've been exchanging with the second son of the Qiuzhou family, would you? What? How did you know about that, Mr. Luo Qing? Chisato's frustration value +1. Chisato paled, nervously glancing back toward the doors of the Kenjo Commission. Seeing that her father hadn't followed them out, she let out a quiet sigh of relief. Of course, I'm not asking you to help for nothing. As it happens, I'll be heading to Inajima City soon. I could deliver a letter for you, Luo Qing offered enticingly. This. Chisato bit her lip, hesitating, then seemed to make up her mind. With one last wary look at the doors of the Kenjo Commission, she swiftly pulled a letter from her kimono and handed it to Luo Qing. Please take care of this letter, Mr. Luo Qing. Wait, really? Luo Qing glanced down at the letter in his hand, marveling at how boldly she carried her love letters around. She handed it over so easily. I guess love really does make people blind. As for your request, I'll keep an eye out for them, but my father is quite strict, so I can't make any promises. No worries, Miss Chisato. Do your best, Luo Qing said, passing the letter to Natalia. I'll make sure your letter reaches its destination. I'm counting on you, Miss Chisato. Chisato bowed lightly. Thank you, then I'll leave it in your capable hands, Mr. Luo Qing. Her father was vehemently opposed to any communication between her and Qiuzhou Kameji. Even sending a simple message to the city was a gamble, risking endless interrogation. Thus, rather than doubting Luo Qing's sincerity, she clung to the chance to reach her beloved, even if it was a long shot. After parting ways with Chisato, Luo Qing and his group prepared to leave Ritou. Natalia and the others, having learned about Chisato's forbidden romance, teased Luo Qing, urging him to open the letter and see what lovey-dovey words it contained. Fortunately, Luo Qing, being an upright man, sternly rebuked them. Only then did Natalia abandon the idea of sneaking a peek, stuffing the letter into her luggage without further thought. As they passed by the International Trade Association, Luo Qing caught sight of a man in a red outfit slipping through the crowd. The man pretended to be in deep conversation with a merchant, but his gaze occasionally flitted towards Luo Qing. "Tch, still tailing me, hey?" Luo Qing muttered. He considered it briefly before deciding that his persistent shadow deserved a little Snezhnayan surprise. "Natalia, you guys go ahead. I'll catch up later." "Hey? Do you have something else to do, Mr. Luo Qing?" Natalia asked, stopping alongside the others to look at him. "I spotted an acquaintance." "Go on, I'll follow shortly." "Understood, Mr. Luo Qing," Natalia responded. Without further questions, they picked up their luggage and moved on without glancing back. Once his companions were far enough away, Luo Qing suddenly turned, locking eyes with the man in red. His gaze was intense, almost burning. Meanwhile, Toma, who had been feigning a casual chat, met Luo Qing's stare and felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He was under orders to investigate the Kenjo Commission, searching for any incriminating evidence that could serve as leverage for the Yashiro Commission and the Kamisato family. Upon discovering that the Kenjo Commission had switched their tax collection from Mora to Crystal Marrow and learning from a port official that this group of foreigners, despite being new to Inajima, had unrestricted travel permits, he began to suspect something. When he saw Luo Qing leaving the Kenjo Commission with Iragi Chisato, it only confirmed his suspicions they were definitely involved with the same underhanded dealings. As Luo Qing approached him directly, Toma knew he'd been caught. Resigned, he decided to stay put and face whatever would come. He had confidence in his ability to get along with anyone, even Luo Qing. With the right words, he was sure he could gain some insight into the Fatui's intentions. "Excuse me, sir. Do you?" Toma began, but Luo Qing interrupted him with a hearty greeting. "You must be the Kamisato family's housekeeper, Mr. Toma." That's right. Is there something I can help you with?" Toma replied, a bit off balance. "There's something I'd like to ask. Would you mind giving me some insight?" What is it you want to know?" "Well..." Luo Qing leaned in conspiratorially, pulling Toma aside and lowering his voice. "I was wondering, is the young lady of the Kamisato family still single?" "Hey?" Toma's brow furrowed, sensing this was no ordinary inquiry. "You see, although I've never formally met Miss Kamisato, I feel a strange connection to her. I've admired her from afar for quite some time. Could you, perhaps, help me arrange a meeting?" Luo Qing said earnestly. Toma's frustration value +1. Toma's mind raced, unsure how to respond. Who starts a conversation by asking if they can meet someone's lady? You're way too bold. Chapter 70, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 70. This is quite inappropriate, sir. I don't even know your name yet. Toma looked slightly uncomfortable. He had never encountered someone like Luo Qing, who seemed to wear his intentions so openly. Doesn't he fear embarrassment? "Oh, that's right. I'm Luo Qing." Luo Qing eagerly grabbed Toma's hand, feigning excitement as if overcome by emotion. "So, now can you introduce me, Mr. Toma? I heard the Kamisato estate is quite far. Shall we set out now?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Luo Qing, but that's impossible. The young lady does not like meeting people publicly." Toma was flustered, inwardly thinking, does this guy not have any shame? Why is he in such a rush? "I see." Luo Qing put on a show of disappointment, hanging his head. In a softer tone, he said, then it looks like I'll have to go back and work harder. After a moment, he lifted his head again, pretending to be fired up. Thank you for the encouragement, Mr. Toma. I'll make sure to improve myself and earn the chance to meet Miss Kamisato. With that, Luo Qing turned and walked away, leaving Toma standing there, completely bewildered. It wasn't until Luo Qing was long gone that Toma snapped out of his daze, replaying their conversation in his mind. This man named Luo Qing had only talked about wanting to meet his lady. Could he have been subtly warning me not to meddle with the Kenjo Commission? Was he threatening to harm Miss Kamisato if I got involved? It wasn't out of the question. Toma thought it over carefully. It seemed the priority was to get his findings from Ritou back to the Kamisato estate and, while he was at it, warn Miss Kamisato to be cautious of this Luo Qing. He hadn't exchanged blows with Luo Qing, but his gut told him there was far more to the man than met the eye. Several days later, at the Kamisato estate, Kamisato Ayato was seated at his desk, poring over the mountain of paperwork related to the Yashiro Commission's affairs. The Kamisato clan was currently in a period of rebuilding. Although his younger sister was quite mature for her age, she was still not yet ready to handle the family's business. As a result, Ayato was left to oversee both the Yashiro Commission's and the Kamisato family's matters, making him, without a doubt, the busiest of the three heads of the commissions. Just as he was studying one of the documents, a servant's knock echoed from outside. Lord Ayato, there's a delivery girl from the Karagi courier service outside. She says she has a package for you and needs your signature. A package? Ayato raised an eyebrow. The servant hesitated. Yes, she insisted that it requires your personal signature and refused to hand it over to anyone else. Let her in, then. I could use a short break. Understood. The servant bowed respectfully and left. Moments later, he returned, leading a young girl with cat ears on her head and two long, swaying tails. Kamisato-san, here's your package. Please sign for it. And if you don't mind, could you give me a 5-star review? Thank you. Kirara held the package out with both hands, her face adorned with a bright, sweet smile. She gave Ayato a small bow. Thank you. Ayato accepted the package, glancing at the name of the sender. A slight confusion crossed his face. Luo Qing. Isn't that a name from Liyue? Are you sure this is for me? I don't recognize the sender. Yes. The gentleman specifically requested you to sign for it, and he even tipped extra more to make sure it arrived quickly. I see, thank you. Ayato marked the review sheet with 5 stars, and Kirara's ears perked up happily at the sight. Then I won't disturb you any longer, Kamisato-san. Have a wonderful day. After Kirara left, Ayato inspected the package, checking the packaging carefully. He used his vision to sense any hidden elemental traces. After confirming that there were no threats, he slowly unwrapped the box. Inside the brown paper was a round, black disc. A phonograph record. Ayato blinked in confusion, turning the disc over in his hands. He glanced over at his servant. Bring me my phonograph. Yes, my lord. Shortly after, the servant carefully carried in a fontaine-made phonograph, placing it on Ayato's desk. Ayato gave the disc another glance before slipping it onto the player. The machine whirred to life, the disc spinning. Soon, a rough, deep male voice echoed from the brass speaker. Dun 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 dun. The vast horizon is my love, flowers bloom at the foot of the green hills. What rhythm could be the most rockin' groove? Ayato's frustration value +1. Ayato's brows furrowed at the bizarre and off-tune singing. He wondered if someone was playing a prank. But he didn't stop the phonograph, choosing instead to endure the offbeat melody, curious if it held some hidden message. As he listened, footsteps approached the door. My lord, you're listening to quite an interesting piece. Is this the rock music they play in Fontaine? Toma stepped in, grinning playfully. He had heard the jarring music before even entering the room, and despite its oddity, he found it strangely catchy. Toma, you're back. Ayato smiled faintly, pressing pause on the phonograph. In a calm voice, he asked, You've come at the right time. While you were in Ritou, did you come across anyone named Luo Qing? What? Toma's frustration value +1. Toma froze. He had rushed back as quickly as possible to deliver his report, and yet it seemed he was already a step behind Luo Qing. Panic flashed across his face. Did something happen to Miss Kamisato? Ayato's frown deepened. Ayaka? She's been resting at home these past days. She only left for Komore House 2 days ago. Why do you ask? And nothing, as long as she's safe, Toma replied, sighing with relief. It's like this, my lord. Toma proceeded to recount his investigation of the Kenjo Commission in Ritou, including the matter of Luo Qing. I see. Ayato rested his chin on his hand, staring thoughtfully at the phonograph. He seemed to be lost in thought. Changing the tax from Mora to Crystal Marrow. A foreigner treated as an honored guest by the Kenjo Commission. You think his words were a veiled warning? It's only a guess. Still, the way he acted back there, it was like he was some kind of stalker. Toma said with a grimace. Ayato considered this for a moment before speaking calmly. Toma, I'd like you to stay in Ritou a while longer. Keep an eye on any visitors arriving at the port. As for the Crystal Marrow, I'll have someone investigate it discreetly. And what about Miss Ayaka? Toma asked anxiously. I'll send someone to accompany her as well. She's gone to Inajima City to formally submit a proposal to lift the Vision Hunt decree. Since she's within the Raiden Shogun's domain, there's no need for concern. Understood, my lord, Toma said with a nod after a moment's hesitation. The two discussed the specifics of the Kenjo Commission's dealings for a while longer before Toma excused himself. After Toma left, Ayato's gaze shifted to the ceiling beams above. In a soft voice, he said. I'll leave Ayaka's protection to you. A drowsy voice answered from the rafters a moment later. Didn't get enough sleep, and now there's more work. Chapter 71, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable 71-200 PS. Meanwhile, at Byakko Plain. Luo Qing glanced at the sudden notification of 2 new frustration values in his system. It seemed that the package he entrusted to Kirara had successfully reached Kamisato Ayato. But what puzzled him was why Toma was also involved. Could it be that Toma had run back to inform Ayaka of his intentions to meet her? Am I really that intimidating? He thought about it briefly but ultimately brushed it aside, focusing on leading Natalia and the others as they continued their journey toward Inajima City. Inajima Island, with its unique geography, was the only place among the archipelago that had vast plains. Even though they had been traveling for almost a week, they had only just passed through Konda village and reached Byakko Plain. They still had about half the journey left before they would reach Inajima City. Fortunately, with Natalia and the others around, Luo Qing didn't feel too bored. When things got slow, he could always amuse himself by teasing his subordinates and accumulating more frustration value points. Natalia, it's been a week since I asked you to learn We Learn to Meow, and you still haven't mastered it. And you, Sergei, is doing a lightning whip 5 times in a row really that hard? Even a 70-year-old grandpa can pull it off. What's your excuse? Igor, you're laughing, but all you've done is memorize the first line of 13 deadly spear strikes. If you want to learn spear techniques from me, you'd better recite it 10 more times. As they trudged along, Luo Qing continued drilling his 3 subordinates, tirelessly making sure they followed his orders. On the other hand, Natalia, Sergei, and Igor, who initially thought their master would be less eccentric after leaving Snezhnaya, quickly realized just how mistaken they were. At this point, they finally understood. When the team is in danger, the danger lies outside the group. But when there's no danger outside, Lord Luo Qing himself becomes the biggest threat. With gloomy faces, the 3 dutifully carried out his commands. By now, they must have looked like some sort of traveling performance art troupe. Luo Qing, observing their efforts, nodded in satisfaction. He had successfully amassed another 1,000 frustration value points, enough for another 10 pull in the system's lottery. Suddenly, his gaze shifted, noticing something in the distance. Along a side path, a young woman with short, light blue hair was surrounded by a group of hilly churls. These hilly churls emanated a faint purple aura, clearly tainted by the forces of corruption. Leading them was none other than a Thunderhelm Lawa churl. What a coincidence! Luo Qing raised an eyebrow, motioning toward Kamisato Ayaka's direction. You 3, go help her out. Us. Natalia and the others were taken aback. Lord Luo Qing, are you sure you want us to use those weapons? Is there a problem? Do you expect me to step in? Right now, my cover is that of a powerless Snezhnayan merchant, remember. This, understood, Lord Luo Qing. After receiving the command, the 3 stopped walking. They set down the large black cases they had been carrying and opened them, revealing sleek modern weapons. Luo Qing glanced at them once more and added, "Be careful not to hit that lady." Though he said that, in his time-zero domain, even the fastest bullets would slow to a crawl, so there was no real risk of things going wrong. However, considering how close Ayaka was to the hilly churls, only Natalia's heavy sniper rifle, the M82A1, would be effective. Ever since Luo Qing had given Natalia this weapon, she had diligently trained with it. New recruits in Snezhnia already received basic firearm training, and with the system's auto-replenishing ammo buff, her marksmanship had improved significantly. This would be a good test of her skills. Meanwhile, facing the sudden ambush by the hilly churl group, Kamisato Ayaka remained calm, her gaze focused on the Thunderhelm Liyue churl leading them. Though she was the daughter of the Kamisato clan, the vision hunt decree was in effect, and even she couldn't casually use the power of her vision unless absolutely necessary. If word got out, it could become a political weapon for the Tenryu and Kenjo commissions to use against the Yashiro commission. But the hilly churls, corrupted by malevolent forces, had no interest in mercy. The corruption had twisted their minds, leaving them with only the urge to destroy. Realizing that there was no avoiding a battle, Ayaka gripped her blade, prepared to draw it. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang out. In an instant, the towering Thunderhelm Liyue churl in front of her was cleaved in two, falling lifeless to the ground. Then, with several more thunderous shots, the hilly churls surrounding her suffered the same fate, cut down by an unseen force. Ayaka's eyes widened in shock. She could hardly believe what had just transpired, so much so that she didn't even notice the blood that had splattered onto the hem of her skirt. A few seconds later, she turned in the direction of the gunfire, wary of what she might find. Not far away, a blonde girl had just gotten back on her feet, holding a strange, dark weapon that resembled a firearm. She was rubbing her sore shoulder as if the weapon had a hefty kick. A foreigner. Ayaka wondered silently, watching as a black-haired man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, waved and began walking toward her. Sensing no ill intent, Ayaka relaxed slightly. She was grateful for their assistance in dealing with the hilly churls and figured she should at least offer her thanks. When Luo Qing and his group reached her, Ayaka gave a small, polite nod. "Thank you for your assistance. A few shots, nothing more." "Miss, are you heading to Inajima City as well?" Luo Qing asked politely, pretending it was their first meeting. "Yes, I am on my way to the city." "Are you travelers? Your attire seems unfamiliar." "We are," Luo Qing nodded, continuing, "My name is Luo Qing, a merchant from Snezhnia. These are my guards." "I see." Ayaka glanced at the three people behind Luo Qing. Their blonde hair and blue eyes were consistent with Snezhnian features. But why was the merchant's face so different from his Snezhnian guards? "My name is Kamisato Ayaka. It's a pleasure to meet you." Luo Qing bowed slightly and offered, "Since you are familiar with the area and we are newcomers, might we accompany you on the way to Inajima City?" At this, Natalia's patience began to wear thin. She was annoyed. After doing all the hard work carrying the heavy sniper rifle and taking out the enemies, now Luo Qing was all excited to chat up a pretty girl? What's wrong with my broad shoulders and long legs? Are they not appealing enough? She thought bitterly. Her shoulder was still sore from all those sniper shots. T/N, see, can I just keep it Sergey? I don't feel like editing it right now. Had I edited to Sergey get frigged past me. Chapter 72, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 72. This. Kamisato Ayaka hesitated. There were still a few days left in her journey to Inajima City, and traveling alone, she couldn't just agree to accompany strangers, especially foreign travelers. But after a moment's thought, considering the skill demonstrated by the girl behind Luo Qing earlier, if they had intended to harm her, they wouldn't need to resort to such pretenses. After a brief internal struggle, Ayaka gave a gentle nod. "Very well. I shall guide you all to Inajima City as a gesture of gratitude for your assistance earlier." "Then we are grateful, Miss Kamisato," Luo Qing said politely. He shot a glance at the trio behind him, and Natalia, along with the others, quickly packed up their belongings. They instinctively kept a respectful distance, giving Ayaka and Luo Qing some space to walk together. Though they kept straight faces, the three of them felt a wave of relief. Watching their boss flirt openly was a bit awkward, but at least his attention was off them, sparing them from another round of intense drills. Kamisato Ayaka glanced at the trio's behavior, puzzled as to why they were keeping such a distance from her and Luo Qing. However, it wasn't her place to ask, so she simply nodded to Luo Qing and sheathed her sword, leading the way towards Inajima City at a leisurely pace. Luo Qing, not one to miss a golden opportunity, followed her closely, engaging Ayaka in light conversation every now and then. This was the perfect chance to learn more about the current situation in Inajima. A few days passed. At first, Kamisato Ayaka had been a bit reserved whenever Luo Qing started a conversation. But as time went on, she found him far more interesting than she initially expected. He always seemed to bring up topics she loved, like the latest light novels from Ye Publishing House, tea leaf divination for love fortunes, or how to make adorable sweets. These were things she had never shared with anyone. With the Kamisato clan currently undergoing a revival, Ayaka had to present her best self and carry the responsibility of her family's name alongside her brother. These small hobbies became her secret, personal joys. Yet, this traveler she had met by chance seemed to effortlessly bring up the things she treasured in her heart, as if he could see right through her. Normally, she was always careful with her words and actions, even when sharing her interests, maintaining proper decorum to uphold the Kamisato name. But gradually, Ayaka found herself lowering her guard, revealing the more genuine side of herself. Really? Mr. Luo Qing, you've also had your fortune told about your love life? Ayaka asked quietly, her eyes wide with curiosity. Of course. When I was in Liyue, a fortune teller said I was destined to be a heartbreaker. They said the girl I would eventually fall for would be gentle and cool on the outside but passionate at heart, Luo Qing said, acting mysterious. Noticing Ayaka's interest, he leaned closer and whispered with a teasing tone. The fortune teller even said that the girl I would meet in the future might just have an ice vision. Ice vision? Ayaka was stunned, and she slowly lowered her gaze, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. Did Luo Qing know that she had an ice vision? Was he hinting at something? But she had kept her vision well concealed this whole journey, never letting it show. For a moment, Ayaka found herself replaying the conversations she had shared with Luo Qing. This foreigner had a knack for bringing up her favorite topics, even guessing secrets only she knew. Could it be true, what he was saying? But it's a shame, Luo Qing continued, feigning disappointment. With the vision hunt decree going on, I haven't seen a single person with a vision, let alone someone with an ice one. He cast a sidelong glance at Ayaka, noting with amusement how she seemed increasingly flustered. Why yes, it is quite a pity, the vision hunt decree. Ayaka murmured. Part of her wanted to tell Luo Qing that she possessed an ice vision herself, but reason held her back. The decree was still in effect, and revealing her vision could make her and the Kamisato clan targets. But I think the vision hunt decree might end soon. If it does, Miss Kamisato, could you help me keep an eye out for an ice vision wielder? Luo Qing asked, flashing her a playful smile. And if you could make an introduction, that'd be even better. This? I suppose. Ayaka stammered. Well then, I'll be sure to keep an eye out for you, Mr. Luo Qing. Meanwhile, with Luo Qing's attention firmly on Ayaka, Natalia and the others trailing behind found themselves with some free time. When people are idle, they tend to gossip, especially when there's such juicy material right in front of them. Watching their master's expert conversation tactics unfold step by step had been both enlightening and entertaining for the trio. From the initial, careful topic probing to the gradual pressing of advantage once Ayaka had relaxed, and finally ending with light, playful flirting, they were impressed. It was clear now Luo Qing was definitely a heartbreaker. In just a few days, he'd managed to make Ayaka blush and smile like a giddy schoolgirl. If this trip had been as long as some of their journeys in Liyue, it wouldn't be surprising if Ayaka ended up genuinely believing that Luo Qing was her fated partner. Man, if you count this one, that makes 3 girls the boss has successfully flirted with, Igor commented in a hushed voice. Sergei's eyes widened. Keep your voice down. If he hears you, he'll make us do a striptease on Inajima's main street. Don't worry, they're too into their chat to notice us, Igor said with a smirk. Who'd have thought our boss is a real player? Yeah, Sergei added with a nod. He's got skills, though it's a bit shady. Only Natalia seemed slightly irritated, silently lamenting that despite her good looks and figure, Luo Qing had never once treated her like the girls he flirted with. It's not like I'm as clueless as Teresa, she thought, pouting slightly as she adjusted the heavy sniper rifle still resting on her sore shoulder. T/N, for some reason I made sure it's Sergei, but I'm gonna keep the whole Natalia and Natalia thing at quiet. I find it amusing. Oh, and another ice vision user? First Gomu, then Shenhe, then Ayaka? Who's next, Tsarista? Chapter 73, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 73. Inajima City. After several days of traveling together, the moment finally arrived for Luo Qing and Kamisato Ayaka to part ways upon entering Inajima City. Standing under the thunder sakura at the city's entrance, Kamisato Ayaka gave a slight nod to Luo Qing, a hint of reluctance in her expression. I've truly enjoyed our time together, Mr. Luo Qing. Now that we've reached Inajima City, it seems this is where we must part ways. Of course. I also had a wonderful time chatting with you, Miss Kamisato. I look forward to our next meeting, Luo Qing replied with a casual smile. I feel the same. Then, until we meet again, Mr. Luo Qing. With that, Kamisato Ayaka gave a graceful bow and turned to leave. After taking only a few steps, she hesitated, then spun back around, stepping up to Luo Qing and speaking softly. If Mr. Luo Qing ever finds himself in trouble, you can find me at the Komore House in the city. I'll do my best to help you. Well, this really is goodbye for now. She finished her words quickly, turning away before Luo Qing had a chance to respond, and walked off. Oh no, she's definitely fallen for him, Natalia muttered. Yeah, our boss is something else. Ugh, this must be the power of a player, Sergei added. And it seems like she's never had a crush before. Her first one ended up being our playboy boss. Tisk tisk. Igor remarked quietly. The trio whispered amongst themselves. You three, enjoying gossiping about your boss, hey? The moment Kamisato Ayaka was out of sight, Luo Qing spun around, fixing Natalia, Sergei, and Igor with a sharp look. The trio, who had been acting so smug moments ago, instantly froze, panicking at how Luo Qing's hearing seemed to have improved. How had he caught them from several meters away? Boss, we would never. Sergei protested. We were just admiring your skillful conversation techniques. Natalia added hastily. Exactly, exactly. Igor agreed, nodding. Enough of that, Luo Qing cut them off with a dismissive wave, then began walking towards the outskirts of Inajima City. With a resigned sigh, the trio followed after him. Inajima City was bustling, and as foreigners carrying heavy luggage, they would draw unnecessary attention if they lingered too long. So Luo Qing found a quiet spot outside the city, where they wouldn't be disturbed, and issued his orders. Igor, Sergei, you two are to regroup with Teresa. Keep a close watch on those warriors, make sure they don't die, understood? Yes, Mr. Luo Qing. They chorused. What about me, Mr. Luo Qing? Natalia raised her hand eagerly. You'll stay with me in the city. There's a lot of paperwork that will require your attention later, Luo Qing replied. Oh. Yes, Mr. Luo Qing, Natalia responded, a trace of excitement bubbling up at the thought of staying behind. There's work for the secretary to do, she mused, and if there's no work? A sudden flush came over her cheeks as a stray thought crossed her mind. Gosh, has he trained me this well already? After giving orders to Igor and Sergei, Luo Qing led Natalia into Inajima City. Despite its appearance, Inajima City was not free from the Fatui's influence. Following the information left by Rosalind, they quickly located the Fatui operatives embedded within the city. Most of the operatives had been placed there by Rosalind, meant to work alongside the Tenryou Commission to extend the Fatui's reach. As Rosalina's temporary replacement, Luo Qing was now responsible for overseeing operations related to the Tenryou Commission. Once they arrived at their prearranged lodging, Luo Qing settled down and reviewed the latest intel on the Tenryou Commission. After considering the situation, he decided it would be best to deliver a message in person. He still had the letter from Chisato, after all, which could serve as a convenient excuse. Asking Natalia for a map of Inajima City, Luo Qing donned Inajiman attire, noted the marked safe houses and emergency escape routes, and then set out for Tenchikaku, letter in hand. Though he could use his Fatui connections to arrange a direct meeting with Kyujao Sera, revealing himself so soon didn't fit his style. Unlike Rosalind, who preferred a direct approach, Luo Qing enjoyed orchestrating events from the shadows. Liyue and Inajima's people shared similar features, and Luo Qing's disguise allowed him to blend in seamlessly with the crowd. No one gave him a second glance as he strode down the bustling streets. Passing through Hanamizaka, Luo Qing caught sight of the statue of the omnipresent god under construction behind a large bridge. Its grand wings were already embedded with countless visions. Tisk, There are quite a few already, he murmured, admiring the colorful visions that adorned the wings. With that, he crossed the wooden bridge and found himself at the entrance of Tenshikaku. The towering castle, the tallest structure in Inajima outside the Grand Narukami Shrine, loomed overhead, much like the Raiden Shogun herself, overseeing the entire city. Before he could get close, a guard stepped forward to bar his way. Tenshikaku is restricted. No entry without proper business. Luo Qing flashed the letter in front of the guard. I'm here from Ritou with a letter for Lord Kyujao Kameji of the Tenryou Commission. Lord Kyujao Kameji. The guard scrutinized Luo Qing but didn't find anything suspicious. After whispering with another higher-ranking soldier stationed at the main gate, he turned back to Luo Qing and said, "Follow me." Luo Qing raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem? The guard asked, noticing his hesitation. No problem, Luo Qing said quickly, shaking his head. But inwardly, he was puzzled. Just one mention of a delivery, and I got in? Were the guards always this lax, or had Kyujao Kameji already given instructions in advance? He didn't dwell on it for long and followed the guard inside Tenshikaku, arriving shortly at the Tenryou Commission's side chamber. After a brief exchange, the guard left, and moments later, a young man wearing glasses came rushing out. Is that her letter? Kyujao Kameji asked anxiously, his eyes fixed on the envelope in Luo Qing's hand. It is, Lord Kyujao Kameji. Here, it's for you, Luo Qing said, handing over the letter. Suddenly, he felt a gaze upon him and glanced up. On the highest balcony of the towering castle, a purple-haired woman in a traditional kimono watched him with an intense gaze, like a goddess surveying the world from above. Their eyes met, and neither flinched. What's with the staring? Aren't you afraid of getting pregnant? Luo Qing thought to himself, puzzled by her intense scrutiny. Well, I'm not one to be looked at for free. With a slight smirk, Luo Qing opened his system inventory and saw his collection of affection boost cards, 15 in total. His eyes gleamed with mischief as he focused on the woman above. You want to stare? Here's a little pregnancy warning. Affection boost card X1 has been used. Effect influenced by target's mental strength, affection increase, Beelzebul, +1. Raiden Shogun, +1.5. It worked? For both of them. Luo Qing was taken aback. Looks like my charm is still potent. Affection boost card X15 used cumulatively. Effect influenced by target's mental strength, affection increase, Beelzebul, +15. Raiden Shogun, +22.5. Meanwhile, within the plane of euthymia, a seated figure in the void slowly opened her eyes, whispering softly. Who is he? Chapter 74, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 74. Through the Raiden Shogun's gaze, Ei observed the man standing before the Tenryou Commission, locking eyes with the Shogun. There was something strangely appealing about his face, something that made her heart skip a beat. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in a long time. Ever since retreating into the plane of euthymia in pursuit of eternity, she had distanced herself from all unnecessary emotions. Yet now, any slight emotional fluctuation was all too noticeable. Why? Ei frowned, puzzled at her sudden feelings. Was her training not sufficient? After a brief hesitation, she dismissed her focus from the Raiden Shogun's perspective and shut her eyes, resuming her meditation. Meanwhile, watching the fearless and unimpressed Luo Qing below, the Raiden Shogun allowed a faint smile to curve her lips. How interesting. She turned slightly to address the person behind her, her voice cool. Bring him to me. I'll handle this personally. The black-haired girl standing behind her, her face concealed by a Tengu mask, looked momentarily startled. Why was the Shogun summoning someone over a mere exchange of glances? And was it her imagination, or did the Shogun's cheeks just flush slightly? Yes, Shogun. And his crime? His crime? The Raiden Shogun scoffed, her voice low and commanding. Possession of multiple visions. More than one. Understood. The masked girl replied, retreating respectfully from the room. After handing the letter to Kyujao Kameji, Luo Qing had little interest in the man's love-struck ramblings. With the Raiden Shogun no longer staring down at him, he made a few polite farewells and left Tenshikaku. He didn't believe the Raiden Shogun could sense what he'd done, even Liyue's Zhongli hadn't noticed the use of his special cards. 15 affection boost cards had earned him a plus 15 with EI and plus 22.5 with the Raiden Shogun, certainly a worthwhile trade. At the very least, they wouldn't be inclined to strike him down on a whim. Crossing the large bridge in front of Tenshikaku, Luo Qing was just about to head to Hanamizaka to grab some street snacks when hurried footsteps caught his attention from behind. Turning, he saw a black-haired girl wearing a crimson Tengu mask, her chest conspicuously prominent, leading a squad of soldiers towards him at a brisk pace. Before he could react, the soldiers had already encircled him. As he was about to speak, the black-haired girl stepped forward, her voice cold. By the decree of the Shogun, you are to be arrested for the illegal possession of multiple visions. Take him. Hey! Luo Qing was utterly bewildered. His 3 visions were securely stored in his system inventory and hadn't left it since he entered Inajima City. How could they possibly know? Excuse me, ma'am. Is it possible you've got the wrong person? Luo Qing stammered, raising his hands defensively as he took a step back. But the encircling soldiers ignored his protests, advancing steadily. This is a misunderstanding, really. He tried again, contemplating whether he should activate zero time to escape. If the Raiden Shogun herself had issued the order, then being taken in was risky. He wasn't entirely confident he could evade her if it came to that. These archons might very well detect the use of his zero time. But resisting arrest would brand him a fugitive, making it impossible to openly roam Inajima City again, a significant inconvenience. Lady Qiuzhou Sarah, please wait. As he hesitated, a familiar voice called out from the crowd of onlookers. Turning, Luo Qing saw none other than Kamisato Ayaka stepping forward from the throng, positioning herself between him and the soldiers. Her soft grey-blue eyes met his, conveying a silent assurance, "Don't worry, I'm here." Luo Qing's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he was genuinely moved. "Lady Qiuzhou Sarah, may I ask what crime Mr. Luo Qing has committed?" Ayaka asked with calm composure. Seeing Ayaka shielding Luo Qing, Qiuzhou Sarah's eyes flashed with surprise. She answered flatly. "Lady Kamisato, I'm acting under the Shogun's direct orders to arrest an individual in possession of multiple visions. Please, do not obstruct me." "Visions?" Ayaka looked back at Luo Qing in shock. He met her gaze with an embarrassed smile, as if confirming the accusation. The Vision Hunt decree was a matter of national importance, decreed by the Raiden Shogun herself. Without a solid justification, even as the daughter of the Yashiro Commission, she was powerless. "Lady Kamisato, I trust you understand the significance of the Vision Hunt decree. Please step aside," Qiuzhou Sarah said evenly, the soldiers tightening their encirclement. "Wait, hold on," Ayaka said, quickly formulating a response and meeting Qiuzhou Sarah's gaze with renewed determination. "The Vision Hunt decree is meant to apply to the citizens of Inajima, but Mr. Luo Qing here is a merchant from Snezhnaya. Even if he does possess a vision, he's not subject to the decree's enforcement." "A Snezhnayan?" Qiuzhou Sarah's brow furrowed as she scrutinized Luo Qing's Inajiman attire, clearly reconsidering. "If he is indeed from Snezhnaya, does he have an Inajima travel permit?" "Of course, I do." At that moment, Luo Qing quickly pulled a document from his sleeve, an official travel permit for all of Inajima. The document was issued by none other than the Tenryou Commission itself, specifically from Qiuzhou Sarah's jurisdiction. Such permits were only granted to foreigners, completely inaccessible to native Inajimans, and many residents weren't even aware they existed. That Luo Qing could produce one so readily solidified his status as a foreign visitor. "This is..." Qiuzhou Sarah was momentarily at a loss. She was simply following orders, and seeing Luo Qing dressed like an Inajiman had led her to assume he was a local. Now that his foreign status had been verified, enforcing the decree against him was legally problematic. "How about this, Lady Qiuzhou Sarah?" Sensing her hesitation, Ayaka's lips curved into a slight smile as she offered a solution. "Why don't we have Mr. Luo Qing stay under the supervision of the Yashiro Commission for the time being? You can report to the Shogun, and if she still wishes to arrest him, you may retrieve him from the Yashiro Commission at that time. Lady Kamisato, if the Shogun still wants him detained, and he escapes while under your supervision, you understand the consequences for the Yashiro Commission, don't you?" Qiuzhou Sarah's voice was firm. "The Shogun is the ultimate arbiter of Inajiman law. If you report the situation truthfully, I believe she will make a fair and just decision," Ayaka replied confidently. "Humph. Very well, I'll leave him in your care for now, Lady Kamisato." With a final glance at Luo Qing, Qiu Sara turned and departed, the soldiers following in her wake. T/N, Ayaka came in with the clutch. Hiji. Chapter 75, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 75. After Qiu Sara and her men left, Kamisato Ayaka finally let out a sigh of relief, turning to face Luo Qing. "Thank you for your help, Lady Kamisato," Luo Qing said quickly, nodding his thanks. To be fair, he truly was touched by Ayaka's intervention just now. It should be all right for now," Ayaka said softly, her gaze complicated as she looked at him. Then, with a gentle tone, she asked. "Mr. Luo Qing, do you truly possess a vision?" Which one are you referring to?" "Hey." Ayaka looked puzzled. How many could there possibly be? But then she recalled how Qiu Sara had mentioned multiple visions in her accusation. "In any case, Mr. Luo Qing, you should be more careful and avoid using your vision in front of others," Ayaka advised gently. "The Vision Hunt Decree is still in its early stages, and the associated laws are not yet fully established. That's why I was able to exploit a loophole. But if the Shogun decides to extend the decree to include foreigners in the future, even I won't be able to help." "Thank you for the warning, Lady Kamisato. I'll be cautious," Luo Qing assured her, noticing she was now wearing a more formal outfit. Curiosity got the better of him. "Is Lady Kamisato attending an important event?" "Well..." Ayaka hesitated briefly, her eyes drifting towards the distant Tenshikaku. Her voice softened. "Yes. It is a rather important event." She had come to Inajima City to formally present a proposal to the shogunate, advocating for the abolition of the Vision Hunt Decree. While vision bearers were in the minority in Inajima, to the ordinary citizens, the decree had little direct impact. But to those who bore visions, these tokens were seen as divine recognition of their virtue and character. To take them away was to strip them of a fundamental part of their identity. "Well then, Mr. Luo Qing, I have matters to attend to, so I must be going," Ayaka said, nodding politely before preparing to leave. Yet, before she could move, Luo Qing feigned confusion. "Didn't you say you were supposed to be overseeing me on behalf of that lady? Where should I wait for you when you return?" "Hey." Ayaka paused, unsure if Luo Qing was genuinely clueless or just playing along. "Oh. I remember now. How about I wait for you at Komore House, Lady Kamisato?" Luo Qing suggested with a playful smile. Ayaka's cheeks tinged with a soft blush at the mention of Komore House. Should she be worried about leaving him there? But then she recalled that Toma wasn't around, and apart from the staff and a few regular patrons, the only other resident was Terumaru, the Shiba Inu manager. There was no real need to worry. "All right then. If Mr. Luo Qing has the time, he's welcome to wait at the Komore House," Ayaka agreed, nodding before turning to leave. For some reason, even though she had always prided herself on remaining composed, speaking with Luo Qing made her cheeks flush with warmth. Was her training not sufficient? As she walked away, she found herself glancing back until Luo Qing was out of sight, then shook her head, refocused, and steeled herself before entering Tenshikaku. Back at his temporary lodgings, Luo Qing couldn't help but dwell on the recent events. He'd never once utilized a vision's power. How had the Raiden Shogun known he possessed one? Had she somehow detected the subtle trick he'd pulled on her, and simply bluffed to catch him off guard? Regardless, he had learned a valuable lesson: he needed to be more cautious. The Raiden Shogun was not as easygoing as Zhongli in Liyue. Until he was confident he could firmly subdue the lightning-wreathed Shogun beneath him, he'd better tread carefully. Estimating that Ayaka should be done at Tenshikaku by now, Luo Qing changed into a fresh set of clothes and headed towards Komore House. Ayaka's earlier departure in that direction strongly suggested her important event was tied to the Vision Hunt Decree. Visiting the tea house while waiting for her supervised, of course, might also provide a chance to pry some information from her. By the time he stepped out, the sky was already fading into twilight. The streets of Hanamizaka had come alive with bustling stalls, and shop lights shone brightly against the deepening evening. It was just after dinner, and the streets were packed with lively crowds. Though it couldn't compare to the splendor of Liyue Harbor, it had its own charm. When Luo Qing arrived at the entrance to Komore House, a young girl suddenly stepped in his path. "You look unfamiliar, dear guest. Is this your first visit to Komore House?" "And you are?" "I'm Kazuha, the hostess of Komore House," she replied with a polite smile. Do you have a reservation? If not, I'm afraid you'll need to make one first. A reservation? Luo Qing was taken aback. Was Komore House really this fancy? I did arrange to meet Lady Kamisato here, does that count? Lady Kamisato? Kazuha raised an eyebrow, giving him a skeptical once-over. His clothes were ordinary, and he bore no official identification, no commissioner's insignia, no visible status marker. Apart from being somewhat handsome, there was nothing that hinted at any connection with her lady. Another hopeful admirer, trying to sneak a meeting with the lady after learning she frequented the tea house, Kazuha thought, rolling her eyes internally. I'm sorry, sir, but Lady Kamisato hasn't mentioned any reservation with you, Kazuha said, narrowing her eyes knowingly. She'd turned away plenty of admirers before Luo Qing looked just like another. Lady Kamisato hasn't returned from Tenchikaku yet? Luo Qing asked. Nope, she's not back yet. Maybe try again another time. Kazuha suggested with a smile, although a hint of suspicion lingered. How did this guy know about her schedule? Well then. Luo Qing considered heading back to explore Hanamizaka for a while, but as he turned, he saw Ayaka in the distance. She was walking towards the tea house, her shoulders slightly slumped as if troubled. Noticing Luo Qing waiting outside, she perked up, a soft smile returning to her face as she waved. Good evening, Mr. Luo Qing. Good evening, Lady Kamisato. Approaching the entrance, Ayaka gave Luo Qing a curious look. Why are you standing outside? Ah, well. Luo Qing gestured toward Kazuha with a smile. I was eager to see you, so I waited outside and chatted with Miss Kazuha here while waiting. Is that so? Once again, Luo Qing's easy banter brought a faint blush to Ayaka's cheeks. Watching the scene unfold, Kazuha's face showed clear astonishment. She had worked at Komore House for quite a while, but she had never seen Lady Kamisato show even a hint of embarrassment. This is the eldest daughter of the Kamisato family. Was she dreaming? T/N, I should change Kazuha's name here, but I'm keeping it so you guys know where it all starts. Chapter 76, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 76. Feeling the strange gaze from Kazuha, Luo Qing followed behind Kamisato Ayaka and entered Komore House. As soon as they stepped inside, his eyes were drawn to the plump Shiba Inu sitting behind the front counter, sporting a small scarf tied around its head. Its mouth curled up in a characteristic Shiba Inu smile. But then, Luo Qing blurted out in surprise. What a chubby puppier! Terramera's frustration value +1. Terramera's expression froze instantly. Standing up, it barked loudly at Luo Qing. Mr. Luo Qing, this is Teramaru, the owner of Komore House, Ayaka explained softly. She, too, took a brief glance at the fluffy dog, noticing that it had indeed gotten a little rounder under its thick fur. Ahem. I see, Luo Qing said, feigning embarrassment. I just knew Teramaru must be a top-tier dog. Look at that majestic posture. Clearly a master sorts dog. Woof! Barked Teramaru, as if saying, how did you know I can wield a blade? Of course. We should spar sometime if you're up for it. Woof! Mr. Luo Qing, it seems you and Teramaru get along well, Ayaka said with a smile. Indeed, Teramaru is clearly a talented dog. It's been a while since I've seen such a dignified and handsome puppier. Well, Mr. Luo Qing, if you have time, you're welcome to visit Komore House often. You and Teramaru can chat more. I'll have a word with Kazuha, so from now on, you can come in directly whenever you want, Ayaka said gently. She already understood why Luo Qing had been waiting outside, but it was Kazuha's job, and Ayaka couldn't fault her for doing it. Does that mean I'll have more opportunities to visit Miss Ayaka? Luo Qing teased. Ayaka lowered her gaze, a light blush coloring her cheeks, before turning and walking towards the inner tea room. Seeing her retreat, Luo Qing couldn't resist giving Teramaru a hearty pat on the head before hurrying after her. They walked to the tea room at the far end of the corridor, sitting across from each other at a low table. Soon, a servant brought in a tray of tea and snacks. Lady Kamisato, you seem a bit troubled. Did something happen earlier? Luo Qing asked gently, noticing Ayaka's downcast expression. He was certain something had happened at Tenchikaku. Yes. Something did happen, Ayaka replied, nodding slightly. She hesitated, unsure if she should share. If it helps, you can tell me. Sometimes talking about it can make you feel better, Luo Qing said softly, his tone empathetic. In that moment, he played the perfect caring gentleman. Of course, it was just a facade. He was still, after all, a schemer at heart. Well. Ayaka looked into Luo Qing's eyes, hesitated for a few seconds, then slowly began. Mr. Luo Qing, have you heard of the Vision Hunt Decree? Of course. The confiscation of visions in pursuit of eternity, it's even made news in Snezhnia. Yes. The Vision Hunt Decree has affected the lives of many, even altering their destinies. The Yashiro Commission has always advocated for its repeal. I came to Inajima City to present a proposal to the Shogun, urging her to abolish the decree. It seems Lady Kamisato was unsuccessful. Luo Qing guessed gently. Yes. Ayaka admitted with a sigh. Her voice was soft, almost resigned. Both the Kenjo and Tenryu commissions opposed my proposal. It couldn't even reach the Shogun herself. The Vision Hunt Decree and the Tri-Commission were well-known aspects of Inajima's politics, and Ayaka's status as a member of the Kamisato family was no secret. Thus, she felt comfortable sharing this information with Luo Qing. After a moment, she raised her gaze to him again and asked. Mr. Luo Qing, do you think the Shogun's decree is truly just? Of course, it's not. What? Humph. Mr. Luo Qing, you're teasing me. Ayaka pouted, averting her eyes slightly in a rare show of girlish petulance. The vision is a divine recognition of humanity's virtues. Confiscating it in pursuit of some imagined eternity is indeed a harsh fate for those who possess it. Exactly. So why did the Shogun suddenly enact such a decree? Ayaka mused with a sigh. Maybe she's lost her mind. Luo Qing suggested with a conspiratorial smile. Those are dangerous words, Mr. Luo Qing. You mustn't speak them lightly. If the Shogun or her soldiers hear such talk, it could end terribly. It's fine. The Shogun can't hear us from here, Luo Qing replied dismissively, clearly unconcerned by the warning. They were far from Tenshikaku, how could the Shogun hear them from so far away? She wasn't omniscient. Ayaka didn't know how to respond. As a follower of the Raiden Shogun, Ayaka, despite any reservations she might have had, could never utter such blasphemous words against her deity. She decided the conversation was treading on dangerous ground. Mr. Luo Qing, perhaps we should change the topic. Of course, Luo Qing agreed, smiling. Does Lady Kamisato have any favorite dresses, like the floral ones from Fontaine? Hey! Mr. Luo Qing, how did you know I like those? A blush crept over Ayaka's face, surprised yet again by how easily Luo Qing guessed her preferences. Since the conversation had shifted away from serious topics, Ayaka relaxed, becoming more talkative. Gradually, the atmosphere in the tea room grew light, and Ayaka's laughter grew more frequent. Unbeknownst to them, a deep violet eye hovered in the shadows of the ceiling beams, hidden from view yet observing them intently. It remained unnoticed by even Luo Qing, whose usual sharp instincts failed to detect its presence. Night had long fallen. Though the pleasant tea conversation had significantly increased Ayaka's fondness for Luo Qing, it wasn't enough to convince her to invite him to stay the night. Seeing that it was getting late, they agreed to meet again another time, and Ayaka personally escorted Luo Qing to the door of Komore House. After watching him leave, a sudden breeze blew through the courtyard. In the darkness above, a small figure darted from the rafters, landing lightly before Ayaka. Seiyu, what brings you here? Huff, because there's work to be done, Seiyu panted. Work? Huff. The Lord said to tell you to be careful of a man named Luo Qing, Seiyu gasped between breaths. Luo Qing. Hearing the name, Ayaka's eyes widened in surprise. Seiyu, still catching her breath, quickly elaborated. Yes. The Lord said, he's dangerous. He might hurt you, so you have to stay vigilant. Can't. I'm so sleepy, need to rest, she said, yawning. Hurt me? Ayaka murmured, glancing in the direction Luo Qing had disappeared. Her heart filled with unanswered questions. Chapter 77, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 77. When Luo Qing returned to his resting place, it was already late into the night. After a day filled with traveling, delivering messages, and even boosting Kamisato Ayaka's affection points, it had been a busy and productive day. Fatigue overtook him as he instructed Natalia to reconnect with Teresa and the others the next morning. Then, he retired to his own room. Lying on the soft tatami, Luo Qing was just about to drift off when he suddenly sensed the atmosphere in the room change. The air became dense with electro-energy, so much so that it made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Before he could react, a blinding light of electro flickered before him. An ominous purple eye opened in the air, crackling with electric arcs. From within the eye, a sharp blade of lightning slashed through the space, tearing it apart. And then, stepping through the rift, a long, slender leg adorned with a dark stocking and wood-soled sandals, tied with 2 cherry blossoms, appeared. Following this elegant leg was a woman of mature beauty, with a refined and serene demeanor. Her hand gripped the hilt of a sword as her sharp gaze locked onto Luo Qing. This. Luo Qing's eyes widened in disbelief at the sight before him. Did she realize I used the affection cards on her? Why would she suddenly show up in my room like this? Luo Qing forced himself to remain calm. After all, the Raiden Shogun's affection towards him had reached 22.5, so it was unlikely that she would just cut him down outright, right? Is there something I can help you with, Lady Shogun, at this late hour? Luo Qing began, trying to stay composed. But before he could finish, the Raiden Shogun pointed her sword directly at his face, her voice cold and unyielding. What have you done to me? Luo Qing swallowed hard, glancing at the blade just centimeters from his nose. Tension gripped his heart. He considered using his time stop ability, Time Zero, to escape, but given the Shogun's sudden appearance, she clearly had some way of monitoring him. If he fled now, the next time they met, he might not be so lucky to avoid her blade. With all due respect, Shogun, I haven't done anything, yet, Luo Qing said weakly. The Raiden Shogun's brow furrowed. Nonsense. If you hadn't done anything, why would this body? She paused for a moment, then raised her sword higher. You have 3 breaths to explain yourself. If you fail to provide an answer, I'll sever these inappropriate feelings myself. This. Luo Qing felt the situation getting worse. Who pulls a sword on someone just because they start to have feelings? Is this the legendary Yandere behavior? Thinking quickly, Luo Qing opened his system's inventory, searching for anything that might help defuse the situation. The emotion manipulation cards had been useless against Zhongli, so they likely wouldn't work on the Raiden Shogun either. The rest of his items were enhancement tools or healing supplies, nothing helpful in this situation. Could running really be the only option? As he weighed his choices, another thought crossed his mind. Maybe the issue is that her affection level isn't high enough yet. She's confused by these feelings, which is why she's ready to cut me down. But if her affection was maxed out, surely she wouldn't still be holding that sword. 3, 2. Could you give me a minute to gather my thoughts, Lady Shogun? Fine. The Raiden Shogun's expression remained cold as she held her sword steady, waiting for his explanation. Luo Qing pretended to be thinking, but his mind was racing as he navigated to the system's gacha interface. Normally, each 10 pull would net him at least 1 or 2 affection boost cards. If he used them now, maybe her attitude would change? Since the incident with Oziel, Luo Qing had saved up enough for 1 10 pull. Desperate, he ignored his inner hoarder and mentally hit the gacha button. Instantly, stars shot across his vision. As expected, no gold. But he didn't care about that, he only wanted the affection cards. Hurriedly, he skipped through the rewards, and the 10 prizes appeared before him in a neat row. Affection Boost Card Pro Max, Purple, X1. Nausea-Inducing Card, Blue, X2. Physical Enhancement Card, Blue, X2. Weapon Enhancement Card, Blue, X2. Ultimate Healing Pill, Blue, X1. Affection Boost Card, Blue, X2. An Affection Boost Card Pro Max. Luo Qing's eyes lit up as he hurriedly opened the item's description. Affection Boost Card Pro Max. After use, this item will forcibly increase the target's affection by 15 points, unaffected by the target's mental resistance. P.S. Due to the forced nature of this item, the target may exhibit unpredictable behaviors, such as Yandere tendencies, if stimulated by the host's actions. Affection Stages. 30. Close Friend. 60. Ambiguous Feelings. 90 plus, Romantic Partner. P.S. Affection exceeding 100 may lead to uncontrollable consequences. Please manage the target's feelings responsibly. Luo Qing sighed in relief. He understood the description well enough. Essentially, using this item recklessly might lead to Yandere behavior and a bad ending. But at this point, he didn't care about that. What's the worst that could happen? The Raiden Shogun couldn't possibly squeeze me dry, could she? Ding! Affection Boost Card Pro Max has been used. Affection increased by Raiden Shogun, plus 15. EI, plus 15. The next moment, Luo Qing could visibly see the Raiden Shogun's grip on her sword tremble slightly. Her gaze shifted, becoming more conflicted as she looked at him. Are you all right, Lady Shogun? Luo Qing asked cautiously. What is happening to this body? What have you done to me? For someone who had known a person for a long time, even a 30-point affection increase wouldn't cause much change, as it would have developed naturally over time. But for Luo Qing, who had no prior relationship with the Raiden Shogun, jumping straight to 37.5 affection was like triggering an emotional shortcut. Without any build-up or gradual understanding, both the Raiden Shogun and EI were suddenly overwhelmed by feelings of fondness toward someone they had just met, a textbook case of what we commonly call love at first sight. Chapter 78, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 78. Lady Shogun, are you all right? Luo Qing asked timidly, pretending to be clueless about what had transpired. On the other side, the Raiden Shogun's brows furrowed as she pressed the tip of her sword into the ground, deliberately avoiding Luo Qing's gaze. She found that whenever their eyes met, an uncontrollable joy would surge in her chest, a sensation so strong that she had the absurd urge to draw closer to him. Just a single glance, and she was already like this. If she looked any longer. Is the Shogun feeling unwell? Perhaps you should sit and rest for a moment. Luo Qing's voice was full of concern, though he feigned innocence as if none of this had anything to do with him. This body. The Raiden Shogun glanced up at Luo Qing once more. In just that instant, the overpowering feeling flooded her again, forcing her to turn away. No, she couldn't bear to look, not even for a second. How could this be? From the moment of her creation, her heart had only been dedicated to one purpose, fulfilling her mission and ensuring Inazuma's eternal stability. Yet, after merely looking at Luo Qing a few times, a strange and foreign emotion had taken root inside her, an emotion that was beginning to shake the very foundation of her beliefs. Logically, anything that might obstruct her path to eternity should be removed. Even her own superfluous emotions needed to be severed. By all rights, she should have cut down Luo Qing with a single stroke, erasing any lingering thoughts from her heart. Just moments ago, she had been determined enough to draw her sword. But now, why did that resolve waver after just a few seconds? For a warrior, hesitation when holding a blade was an unforgivable error. Lady Shogun. Seeing her standing motionless, Luo Qing cautiously ventured another question. By now, he understood that the solid 15-point increase in her affection had pushed this puppet to her limit. Although her mental acuity might not be the best, her martial prowess was unparalleled. If it had been any other girl, Luo Qing would have already offered a comforting hand to help her sit down. But this was the Raiden Shogun, a being capable of splitting mountains with a single stroke. If he overstepped and she reacted out of instinct, it could end badly. Perhaps, we should sit down and have some tea first. Luo Qing suggested gently as he called out towards the door. Natalia, come and bring some tea. Moments later, the creaky sound of footsteps echoed from the wooden hallway, accompanied by a tired yawn. Natalia, still half asleep, rubbed her eyes lazily as she slid open the door. Luo Qing, why are you asking for tea so late? Won't it keep you up all wait, who is? Her sentence trailed off when she noticed the other presence in the room, a stunning woman, her face flushed, with a presence as commanding as it was alluring. The deep cleavage of her chest, her smooth and snowy white shoulders. Natalia knew exactly who this was. She had spent hours poring over intelligence reports about the Raiden Shogun, and now here she was in the flesh. Even her photos had almost been licked clean by Natalia's enthusiasm. Why are you just standing there? Go fetch the tea. Luo Qing quickly shot Natalia a warning look, hoping she wouldn't do anything rash. Why yes, Lord Luo Qing. Natalia scrambled out of the room. A few moments later, she returned, carrying a steaming teapot. However, when she entered the room, she saw that nothing had changed. Luo Qing and the Raiden Shogun were still standing exactly where they had been, in the same positions as before. Puzzled, she asked. Lord Luo Qing, are you planning to drink tea while standing? Ahem, you're right. Lady Shogun, why don't we sit down and talk over tea? Luo Qing made a show of casually sitting down at the tea table, extending his right hand to invite the Raiden Shogun to join him. The fact that the Raiden Shogun had suddenly come to him in the middle of the night meant she didn't want anyone else knowing about their encounter. As a god governing an entire nation, her actions needed a legitimate pretext. Even if she wanted to kill Luo Qing, she would need a justifiable reason. By bringing Natalia into the room for tea, Luo Qing ensured that there was a witness present. The Raiden Shogun couldn't act rashly now without just cause. After a brief moment of hesitation, the Raiden Shogun glanced at Natalia, then waved her right hand. Her sword vanished in a flash of lightning, and she silently sat down across from Luo Qing. Yet, she kept her gaze lowered, avoiding his eyes. Seeing that she had finally sat down, Luo Qing shot Natalia another meaningful look, one that said to stop ogling the Raiden Shogun and hurry up with the tea. Oh, right. Coming. Natalia snapped out of her daze, set the tea set between them, and carefully poured hot tea into their cups. Every now and then, she stole glances at the breathtaking woman before her, truly an image of an ideal wife. Slurp. After serving the tea, Natalia reluctantly left the room. However, she didn't go far. Instead, she tiptoed back to the door and pressed her ear against it, eavesdropping. Being her longtime superior, Luo Qing knew Natalia's tricks well. Natalia, if I catch you eavesdropping, you know what will happen. Immediately, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hall, fading away. Confident that Natalia was gone, Luo Qing adopted a soothing tone. Lady Shogun, I still don't understand what I've done to offend you. Don't play dumb. If you hadn't meddled with me, why would I? The Raiden Shogun's voice trailed off, and she prepared to confront Luo Qing directly. However, the moment their eyes met, that strange emotion surged through her again, causing her to lower her gaze. She now looked more like a girl who had made a mistake but was too stubborn to admit it. What do you mean, I meddled? Lady Shogun, what exactly have I done? Luo Qing played the innocent, realizing by now that she was merely guessing. She hadn't actually detected the use of his system's item. So long as he kept denying it, she had no proof to pin anything on him. Earlier at the Tenshikaku, I merely caught a glimpse of your divine visage. Is it truly a crime to admire you from afar? Caught off guard by his relentless questions, the Raiden Shogun was momentarily thrown off balance. No one ever dared speak to her like this. She had never practiced the art of conversation, and now Luo Qing had the upper hand. Of course, this advantage was purely because it was Luo Qing. Had it been anyone else, she would have cut them down long ago. Frustrated and overwhelmed by feelings she didn't fully understand, the Raiden Shogun found herself in a dilemma. She couldn't strike down the person who was disrupting her heart, yet she also couldn't retreat. Seeing her hesitation, Luo Qing knew his life was safe for now. His task was to buy enough time for these new emotions to settle, knowing they might stabilize soon enough. Just as he was about to press his advantage further, the Raiden Shogun's eyes shifted, as if receiving a silent command. She wants to see you. Before Luo Qing could react, the Raiden Shogun's sword reappeared in her hand, crackling with lightning. With a single slash, darkness swallowed the space around him. Chapter 79, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 79. When Luo Qing's vision was restored, his surroundings had transformed drastically. The wooden beams of the ceiling were gone, replaced by a deep crimson sky under a blood-red moon. The wooden floor beneath his feet had become a stone platform engraved with circular patterns, surrounded by countless shattered torii gates. Floating in the air before him was a figure identical to the Raiden Shogun. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Luo Qing. Ei's voice was soft as she rose to her feet. Are you, the Shogun? Luo Qing asked, feigning ignorance. As always, if he didn't admit to anything, no one could prove that he had used his special item cards. But before he could continue, Ei's hand moved, and a sword crackling with electricity materialized. She approached him and pressed the blade to his throat. Luo Qing was momentarily speechless. Why were both of them so quick to draw their swords? No bonds or emotions appear out of thin air, Ei said, the blade hovering just centimeters from his neck. I'm curious, how did you plant the seeds of attachment within my body? Lady Shogun, Luo Qing began to speak, attempting to use the same tactics he had with the Raiden Shogun, but Ei cut him off. Don't bother pretending. Your eyes betrayed you long ago. You know who I am, don't you? Luo Qing sighed. All right, I know who you are. Lady Ei. Of course, someone who had lived for over 1,000 years would be far more perceptive than that emotionless puppet. Humph, I'll give you one more chance to answer. There's nothing to explain. What do you want me to say? Luo Qing responded casually. Even the emotionless Raiden Shogun hadn't managed to draw her sword against him. He didn't believe Ei, who had experienced sisterhood, friendship, and familial love, would truly strike him down. You think I won't do it? If I tell you a lie, do you think you'll just let me go, Lady Ei? Luo Qing countered. Different women required different approaches, and as a former player, Luo Qing knew one thing. Ei likes it a bit rough. Humph, interesting. Without another word, Ei's arm moved, and her blade sliced toward Luo Qing's neck. What? Ei, are you really going for it? Luo Qing was genuinely taken aback. He hadn't expected Ei to actually attack. Who still gets slashed when the affection points are over 30? If it reaches 90, will she commit murder? These girls are seriously nuts. Thankfully, Luo Qing was always on high alert. The moment he noticed the shift in Ei's stance, he activated his time zero field. In an instant, he dodged her strike, appearing at the edge of the platform, his back pressed against a torii pillar. He was about 10 meters away from Ei when he yelled. Lady Ei, are you seriously going for it? Humph. Ei didn't waste time with words. She transformed into a bolt of lightning, closing the distance in a flash and swinging her blade at him again. Damn it! Luo Qing barely had time to complain before activating his time zero field once more, evading another lethal slash. You're quick, I'll give you that, Ei said calmly, her eyes locked onto him like a predator eyeing prey. But is running away all you can do? Luo Qing could feel her probing gaze, as if she were a hunter toying with her prey. She clearly sensed his sudden bursts of speed. If she exerted her full power, she could probably catch up. But that wasn't her intention. She seemed to be testing his limits, not aiming to kill him outright. Lady Ei, I'm warning you, don't push me. Oh! Another flash of lightning. Ei's blade formed a cage of electricity around Luo Qing, attempting to lock him in. All right, that's it. Cornered, Luo Qing had no choice but to activate time zero again, searching for gaps in the electric prison to dodge her strikes. He noticed that her speed was gradually increasing, matching his own adjustments, as if she were gauging the limits of his abilities. Is she testing me like in the Moment of Wholeness challenge? After evading another attack, Luo Qing realized that this game of cat and mouse couldn't continue forever. He needed to counterattack or she would keep pursuing him without end. With a flick of his thoughts, the Millilith spear materialized in his hand. Time zero activated once more. Luo Qing thrust his spear at Ei, but she was ready. Even within his slowed time domain, she deflected his thrust with her katana. So, you're finally willing to fight back? Ei asked, her tone neutral. Only because I didn't want to embarrass you if you lost too quickly, Lady Ei, Luo Qing retorted. Humph, let's see about that. Electric shadows flared as lightning surged around the platform. Luo Qing's figure vanished again. To an observer in normal time, the platform in the plain of Euthymia seemed empty, save for the intermittent flashes of lightning and the pale yellow glints of a spear in the clash of their battle. Even at 100-fold time dilation, Ei managed to keep up with Luo Qing, leaving him wondering how the traveler, with the strength displayed during the Oziel fight, could ever compete with Ei. But now wasn't the time for such questions. He realized that relying purely on his physical capabilities wasn't enough. Unfortunately, he couldn't harness any elemental power in the plane of Euthymia. Through their exchanges, he began to understand her strategy. She kept pressuring him, denying him any chance to counter, likely to gauge his abilities rather than kill him outright. If he wanted to end this duel, he would have to land a decisive blow. Taking a deep breath, Luo Qing concentrated all his focus. He pushed the time dilation of time zero to its absolute limit 200-fold. In that moment, Ei's blade, which had been hurtling towards him, froze mid-air. Yet before Luo Qing could launch his counterattack, Ei adjusted to the increased time dilation and continued her assault. At 200-fold, she's still this fast. With no other option, Luo Qing summoned a risky move. Using Learn to Meow item card X5. This card had barely caused a momentary distraction for Zhongli, but within the 200-fold slowed time, even a second's hesitation would stretch into an eternity. As expected, in the slowed domain, Ei's expression shifted, her body wavered for a heartbeat. Luo Qing seized the opportunity. He lunged forward with his millilith spear. But just before the spear made contact with her face, Luo Qing pulled back. Instead, he reached out with his left hand, which he'd kept hidden, his middle finger bent, and flicked her forehead. Tap! A crisp sound echoed through the plain of euthymia. Chapter 80, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 80. Plain of euthymia. The domain of time zero dissipated, and the two of them stood facing each other. The faint ache on her forehead brought a flash of surprise to Ei's eyes. Her left hand instinctively touched the spot Luo Qing had flicked, as if she still hadn't fully grasped what had just happened. Luo Qing looked at her disbelieving expression, arms crossed. All right, I hit you first, Miss Ei, so that means I win. You. Ei's mind replayed those few seconds, remembering the strange impulse that had surged within her. She didn't have to guess, it was definitely Luo Qing's doing. Just now, did you tamper with my mind? Luo Qing feigned innocence. Me? Absolutely not, Miss Ei, you mustn't wrongly accuse someone. Humph, then why did I react like that? How should I know? Maybe your will just isn't as steadfast as you think it is. Ei was at a loss for words. Just as Luo Qing had anticipated, the 30 points of affection meant she could no longer bring herself to cut him down. Even though she was certain that the unfamiliar emotions in her heart had something to do with him. Now that the duel's over, Miss Ei, will you let me go? Luo Qing rapped his knuckles against a nearby torii pillar. I've got work tomorrow, you know. Humph, what do you think? Ei scoffed and turned away, floating back to her previous meditative position, eyes closed once more. Since she couldn't bring herself to kill him, she decided to keep him trapped in the plane of euthymia. If he dared to make a move against her, then she would have the perfect justification to finish him off with her blade. What? Miss Ei, what are you doing? Luo Qing moved in front of her, puzzled by her behavior as she hovered with her eyes shut. Miss Ei, if you're planning to sleep, could you at least let me out first? I'd like to get some rest too. Don't play the mysterious sage now, Miss Ei. Miss Ei? Miss Ei? Luo Qing paced around Ei, trying to get a response, but she remained silent, a picture of serene meditation. So you're going to play the cold and distant type, hey? By this point, Luo Qing understood exactly what was happening. This woman was intentionally trapping him in the plane of euthymia. Her motives were anything but innocent. Well, you can't blame me then. With anyone else, they might have believed that this god ruling over Inajima had transcended worldly desires, devoted solely to her ideal of eternity. But unfortunately, the person facing Ei was none other than Teyvat's most audacious transmigrator Luo Qing. With a decisive motion, he rolled up his sleeves, sat down directly in front of Ei, and leaned forward. In his most soothing and gentle voice, he said, Miss Ei, you've been secluding yourself here for a long time, haven't you? Have you ever thought about going out and seeing the world? Ei kept her eyes closed, her expression unchanging. She ignored him. You should know that the world outside has undergone tremendous changes. I bet there are many things out there that would catch your interest, Miss Ei. Why not open the door, and we can go explore together? Still no response from Ei. In that case, how about I tell you a story? Luo Qing thought for a moment and began to weave a tale. There was once a noble family called the Suzuki clan, one of the most prestigious families under the shogunate. The head of the family held a high position among the officials, respected and influential, the undisputed number one family in Inajima. The eldest daughter of the Suzuki family, Suzunaga, showed extraordinary talent from a young age. Growing up in a privileged environment, she mastered etiquette, studied governance, and was hailed as a once-in-a-millennium genius before she even reached adulthood. Her gentle, elegant demeanor earned the admiration of countless young men, and suitors flocked to the Suzuki estate, each vying for her hand in marriage. Everyone believed that the young lady of the Suzuki family would one day marry a young man of equal status and prestige. But little did they know that beneath her gentle and refined exterior, Lady Suzunaga possessed a heart full of courage and a longing for adventure. Her lifelong dream was to roam like a wandering swordsman or an adventurer, exploring the beautiful landscapes of Teyvat, rather than being confined to the high towers and expectations of others. One day, while accompanying her father on a routine inspection, Suzunaga found herself ambushed by hostile factions. Chased into the wilderness, it seemed as though death was imminent, and worse, she feared humiliation at the hands of the enemy before her demise. Just as she thought all was lost, a flash of a blade caught her eye. When she looked up, there was a young man standing before her, a wanderer as swift as the wind. With a few swift movements, he dispatched the enemies before him. He turned to her and smiled gently. "Don't be afraid," he said. "You're safe now." The traces of hardship on his face made him appear far more mature than his years. In that moment, the young lady Suzunaga saw nothing but this ragged swordsman before her. Soon, her father's reinforcements arrived, and they brought the young man back to their estate. At Suzunaga's insistence, the young man became her personal guard, always by her side. A youthful romance blossomed, and it wasn't long before they fell in love, sharing many happy days together. But happiness is fleeting. Their secret relationship was soon discovered by her father. As the head of Inazuma's most prestigious family, he could never allow his daughter to be with a nameless vagabond. It wasn't long before he arranged a marriage for his daughter, promising her to the son of another noble family from the shogunate. At this point, Luo Qing paused, crossing his arms and observing Ei's subtle expressions. He noticed that her closed eyelids quivered slightly. She waited, but when Luo Qing didn't continue, she hesitated, then slowly opened her eyes. "Why did you stop?" "Oh? Is Miss Ei curious about what happens next?" Luo Qing's lips curled into a knowing smile, his arms still crossed. He knew Ei wouldn't be able to resist. This is from a new novel by the Ye Publishing House, The Shogun's Daughter Who Fell in Love with a Wandering Swordsman. If you want to know what happens next, Miss Ei, you'll have to go outside and read it for yourself. Humph. Fine, don't tell me then. Ei scoffed, closing her eyes once more, pretending to meditate. But it wasn't long before she heard Luo Qing, his voice adopting the eager tone of a gossiping auntie. "Oh, I wonder if the lady will run away with the wandering swordsman, or will she accept her father's arrangements and marry that unknown nobleman? Ah, I really want to know what happens next. It's so painful not to know." +1 frustration value from Ei. Tisk, I've heard that there's a new dessert called dango milk that's all the rage at Hanamizaka. It's sweet, creamy, and just one sip can make you happy for the whole day. Imagine sipping on dango milk in the middle of the day, while listening to the rest of the story. Now wouldn't that be delightful? +1 frustration value from Ei. Ei swallowed slightly, her brows furrowing as she opened her eyes. "Are you doing this on purpose?" "No, Miss Ei, I'm doing this deliberately."
Thanks for listening.